The cardboard box split at the bottom as I carried it down the stairs, spilling my childhood photos across the hardwood floor. I didn't have time to cry. Marcus stood in the doorway, arms crossed, designer watch glinting in the afternoon light. "You've got 2 hours, Emma. Whatever you don't take goes to Goodwill." His voice was calm, almost bored, as if he wasn't evicting his dead wife's only child. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." I knelt to gather the scattered photographs, Mom and me at the lake, my 6th birthday, her wedding day to my biological father. The frame of my parents' wedding photo had cracked, a jagged line separating their smiling faces. "This is my home too," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Your mother isn't here," Marcus cut me off, checking his phone. "And the mortgage is in my name now. I need this space for my home office. Your time's up, Emma. You're 18. Most kids your age are thrilled to get their independence." As if being kicked out 3 weeks after your mother's funeral, with nowhere to go, was some kind of gift. I looked around the craftsman-style home my biological father had renovated before he died. The built-in bookshelves he'd crafted by hand, the window seat where Mom used to read to me. Now it was just another property in Marcus Winter's growing real estate portfolio. "What about Mom's things? Her jewelry? The family albums?" Marcus's expression hardened. "I've already packed what matters. The rest." He gestured vaguely toward the garage. "Donated. It was time to clear the space." Clear the space, like my mother had been nothing but clutter. My phone buzzed. "Uncle Peter. I'm outside when you're ready." I clutched the broken picture frame, suddenly understanding that this house had stopped being a home the day Marcus moved in, 4 years ago. I just hadn't wanted to see it. 2 hours, Marcus repeated, already walking back to his home office. "And leave your key on the counter." I watched him go, this stranger who had been the last person to see my mother alive, the man who had held her hand in the hospital while I was stuck in finals week, unaware that I was about to lose everything. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that losing my home was just the beginning. The truth about Marcus, about my mother's death, about the inheritance that should have been mine. It was all waiting to be uncovered. And when it was, Marcus Winters would regret the day he ever crossed Emma Parker. The day Marcus kicked me out was unseasonably cold for October in Riverside. I remember because the heater in Uncle Peter's ancient Volvo rattled loudly as we drove away from the only home I'd ever known, my entire life condensed into 3 suitcases and a backpack. "You can stay as long as you need," Peter said, navigating through the historic district where our family had lived for generations. "The apartment above the bookstore isn't much, but it's quiet." I pressed my forehead against the cool window glass, watching my childhood recede in the side mirror. He didn't even wait a month after the funeral. Peter's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Marcus Winters has always been efficient when it comes to getting what he wants. There was something in his tone, a bitterness I'd rarely heard from my gentle, bookish uncle. In the 4 years since Mom had married, Marcus Peter's visits had become increasingly rare. At the time, I'd attributed it to normal family dynamics. Now I wondered what else I'd missed. "Did you and Mom talk much? Before?" I couldn't finish the sentence. Peter turned onto Main Street, where his bookstore, Riverside Reads, had occupied the same storefront for 15 years. "Not as much as I wanted to." He pulled into the alley behind the shop. Rachel was distant these last few years, especially after her diagnosis. The breast cancer diagnosis had come 6 months ago, followed by aggressive treatment that seemed to be working, until suddenly it wasn't. The end had been swift and merciless. "She didn't tell me she was getting worse," I said as Peter killed the engine. "I would have come home from school. I would have been there." "I know, Em." Peter's voice was gentle. Rachel made her choices. Not all of them make sense to me either. The apartment above the bookstore was small but charming, with sloped ceilings and a wall of windows overlooking the river that gave our town its name. Books filled every available space, stacked on side tables, lined up along windowsills, piled beside the futon that would become my bed. "Bathroom's through there," Peter said, setting down my suitcases. "Kitchen's basic but functional, and there's Wi-Fi, though it's spotty when it rains." I sank onto the futon, suddenly exhausted. "Thanks for this. I don't know what I would have done." Peter leaned against the doorframe, studying me with eyes so like my mother's it made my chest ache. "Your family, Emma. You always have a place with me." He hesitated. "Did Marcus say anything about your college fund? Or the house? Your father's renovation should have increased its value considerably." I shook my head. "According to Marcus, there's nothing left. Mom's medical bills wiped out their savings, and he says the mortgage is underwater." I repeated what Marcus had told me the day after the funeral, when I'd asked about continuing at State University. He said Mom never set anything aside for my education, that they were living paycheck to paycheck. Peter's expression darkened. "That doesn't sound like Rachel. Your mother was always careful with money, even before she got sick." "People change," I said, echoing Marcus's words, "and cancer is expensive." Still, Peter pushed away from the doorframe. "Something doesn't add up. Your biological father, Michael, he left a trust for you, and the house should have been, at least partially, in Rachel's name." I looked up sharply. "What trust? Marcus never mentioned any trust." "It was small," Peter said, "but it existed. Michael set it up before the accident, when you were 5. Rachel was the trustee until you turned 18. He checked his watch. "Look, I need to open the shop. Why don't you get settled? We can talk more tonight." After Peter left, I unpacked my meager belongings, trying to make this unfamiliar space feel like mine. I placed the few photos I'd saved on the nightstand. Mom, before she got sick, her smile wide and carefree. Dad holding me on his shoulders at some long-ago summer barbecue. Uncle Peter and Mom as teenagers, sitting on our porch swing. I opened my laptop to check my university email, dreading the conversation I'd need to have with the financial aid office. Without the money I'd thought was secure, my educational future hung in the balance. A notification popped up. A calendar. Reminder for tomorrow. Meeting with Mom's lawyer, 3 p.m. I stared at it, confused. I had no recollection of scheduling a meeting with any lawyer. Had Mom set this up before she died? I checked the details, but there was only an address in the downtown business district. I was still pondering this when my phone rang. Zoe, my best friend since kindergarten. "Tell me you're okay," she said when I answered. "I drove by your house and saw Marcus showing some real estate guy around. What's happening?" "Marcus kicked me out," I said, the reality of my situation hitting me anew. "Said he needed the space. I'm staying with Uncle Peter. He can't just throw you out." Zoe's outrage was comforting in its predictability. "That house is yours too. Your dad built. Like half of it." "Apparently not legally," I sighed. "Marcus says his name is on everything." "That's bullshit," Zoe declared. "What about all your mom's stuff? Her jewelry? Those first editions your dad collected?" I closed my eyes, remembering the mostly empty closets I'd found while packing. Gone. Marcus said he took care of it. "That sounds suspicious as hell, Em. My dad's a real estate attorney. Let me ask him." "No," I interrupted. "I actually have a meeting with Mom's lawyer tomorrow. I'll figure it out." I hesitated. "But there is something you could help me with." "Name it." Marcus mentioned donating things to Goodwill. "Could you check with the one near my house? See if they got a donation recently? I want to try to get some of it back if I can." "On it," Zoe promised. What are you going to do about school? Aren't tuition payments due soon? I don't know, I admitted. One disaster at a time. After hanging up, I wandered to the windows overlooking the river. The water flowed steadily, indifferent to my troubles. 4 stories below, people strolled along the river walk, their lives continuing normally while mine had been upended. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Emma, this is William Jenkins. I was your mother's attorney. Looking forward to our meeting tomorrow. Please bring identification. There are important matters to discuss. I texted back, I'll be there. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Can you tell me what this is about? The response came quickly. Your mother's instructions were explicit. We'll discuss everything in person. I set my phone down, a strange mixture of hope and dread building in my chest. Mom had planned this meeting. She'd made arrangements. The question was, what kind of arrangements? And why hadn't she told me about them herself? The bookstore closed at 7, and Peter came upstairs with pizza and bottled root beer, my favorite comfort meal since childhood. How are you holding up? He asked, setting the pizza box on the coffee table. Confused, I admitted, showing him the text from the lawyer. Did you know about this meeting? Peter served us each a slice of pizza. Rachel mentioned she was updating her will after the diagnosis. I assumed Marcus would handle all that. Why would she set up a meeting for me without telling me? Peter's expression was thoughtful. Your mother kept a lot of things close to the chest, especially these last few years, after she married Marcus. He trailed off. What? I prompted. He sighed. She changed, Emma, became secretive, started canceling our weekly lunch dates. When I'd ask about you, she'd change the subject. I thought about how Mom had stopped, encouraging my visits home from college, always finding reasons why it wasn't a good time. How our phone calls had become shorter, more superficial. I thought she was just busy, or tired from the treatments. I picked at my pizza, appetite fading. Do you think Marcus was controlling her? I don't know, Peter said carefully. But I never trusted him. There was something calculated about the way he pursued Rachel after Michael died. What do you mean? Peter leaned back, his expression troubled. Your mother was vulnerable after the accident. A young widow with a small child, a house she couldn't afford to maintain alone. Marcus appeared like some kind of financial savior. Within months, he'd helped her refinance the house, consolidate her debts, invest Michael's life insurance payout. But they didn't get married until years later, I pointed out. No, Peter agreed. Marcus played the long game. By the time he proposed, he'd made himself indispensable. I remembered how quickly Marcus had taken over our family finances after the wedding, how Mom had surrendered her independent banking accounts, her credit cards. At the time, it had seemed like practical consolidation. Now it looked more like systematic control. You think he married her for money? Even as I said it, I realized how naive I sounded. Marcus was a successful real estate agent. Mom had been a part-time librarian. But we were never rich. The house, Peter said simply. That location in the historic district? The craftsman details, the river view? It's worth a fortune, Emma. Michael knew that when he bought it as a fixer-upper. It's why he put so much work into the renovation. A memory surfaced. Marcus, shortly after moving in, talking about how much potential the house had. How he could easily flip it for double what it was worth. Mom had laughed it off at the time. This house stays in the family, she'd said. I promised Michael. If the house is so valuable, why would Marcus tell me the mortgage is underwater? I asked. Peter's expression darkened. That's what I'd like to know. Before we could discuss it further, my phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. No donation at Goodwill. Checked all 3 locations. Nothing from your address in the last month. Getting weird vibes about this, Em. I showed Peter the message. If Marcus didn't donate Mom's things, what did he do with them? Sold them, most likely, Peter said grimly. Some of those first editions were valuable, and Rachel had her grandmother's jewelry, including a sapphire necklace that was quite impressive. Why would he need to sell them if he's doing so? Well, I wondered aloud. His real estate business seems successful. New car, expensive suits, that ridiculous watch. Appearances can be deceiving, Peter said. Especially in real estate. One bad investment can wipe you out. I yawned suddenly, the emotional exhaustion of the day catching up with me. I should try to sleep. Big day tomorrow with this mysterious lawyer meeting. Peter squeezed my shoulder as he stood to leave. Call me as soon as you're done. And Emma, don't mention it to Marcus, not until we know what's going on. After he left, I prepared for bed, my mind racing with questions. What had Mom been hiding? What had she wanted? To tell me that she couldn't say in person? And why had she waited until after her death to reveal it? I fell asleep, clutching the broken picture frame I'd rescued from my house. My parents' smiling faces watching over me in this strange new chapter of my life. Morning came with a pale sun struggling through cloud cover and the comforting sounds of the bookstore coming to life below me. I dressed carefully for the lawyer meeting, choosing an outfit that made me look older than my 18 years. Dark jeans, a blazer over a simple blouse, ankle boots that had been a gift from Mom on my last birthday. Peter was helping a customer when I came downstairs, but he gestured toward the small cafe area in the back where a cup of coffee and a blueberry muffin waited. Nervous? He asked when he joined me a few minutes later. A little, I admitted. I keep thinking about why Mom would set this up without telling me. Rachel had her reasons, Peter said. She always did, even if she didn't share them. He hesitated. There's something else you should know before you go. I looked up from my coffee. What? I did some checking last night. Made some calls to old friends in the real estate business. Peter lowered his voice. Marcus is in financial trouble, Emma. Serious trouble. He leveraged himself on a commercial development that fell through. Word is he's been scrambling to liquidate assets. Assets like our house? I asked, my stomach dropping. Maybe. The timing of him kicking you out, supposedly donating your mother's belongings, it all fits. He might be preparing to sell. Can he even do that, so soon after Mom died? Peter's expression was grim. If his name is on the deed, yes. I pushed away my half-eaten muffin. I should get going. The lawyer's office is downtown. Take my car, Peter offered, sliding the keys across the table. And remember, call me as soon as you're done. William Jenkins's law office occupied the third floor of one of Riverside's oldest buildings, a stone structure overlooking the courthouse square. The receptionist, an elderly woman with kind eyes, led me to a conference room where a slender man in his 60s waited. Emma, he greeted me, rising to shake my hand. You look just like your mother at your age. Please sit down. I sank into the offered chair, oddly comforted by the traditional surroundings. The mahogany table, leather-bound law books, certificates on the walls. This was a place of order, of rules. After the chaos of the past month, it felt reassuring. Thank you for coming, Jenkins said, opening a folder. I've been your mother's attorney since before you were born. I handled her first marriage contract, your father's will after his accident, the trust he established for you, and finally, her most recent will, updated 3 months ago. Trust, I repeated. My uncle mentioned something about a trust, but Marcus told me there wasn't any money left for college. Jenkins adjusted his glasses, studying me carefully. That's concerning. According to my records, the trust your father established contained approximately $120,000, designated for your education. Your mother was the trustee until your 18th birthday, which was 6 weeks ago. I supplied. Yes. Jenkins consulted his notes. At that point, control should have transferred to you directly. Did you receive any paperwork? Bank. Information? I shook my head, a cold feeling spreading in my chest. Nothing. I see. Jenkins made a note. That's one matter we'll need to investigate. But it's not why your mother arranged this meeting. He removed an envelope from the folder and slid it across the table. Rachel left this for you with instructions that I deliver it personally 3 weeks after her death. The envelope was heavy cream stationery, sealed with wax, an old-fashioned touch that was completely like Mom. On the front, in her elegant handwriting, was simply, Emma. Would you like privacy? Jenkins offered. I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden lump in my throat. Take your time, he said, rising. I'll be in my office when you're ready to continue. When the door closed behind him, I broke the seal and removed several pages of my mother's familiar handwriting. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then I've lost my battle with cancer, and you're sitting in William Jenkins's office, likely confused and hurt. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Not just for leaving you, but for the secrets I've kept. First, you must know how deeply I love you. Every decision I've made, even the ones that may seem incomprehensible, has been to protect you. By now, Marcus has probably told you that there's no money for college, that the house is underwater, that my illness drained our resources. All of this is a lie. The truth is that your father, Michael, left you well provided for. The trust fund for your education is intact, or it should be. The house is fully paid off, or it was before Marcus convinced me to refinance it. And my life insurance policy named you as the sole beneficiary. I know this is confusing. You're wondering why I would marry a man who I now clearly don't trust. The answer is complicated and shameful. Marcus appeared in our lives when I was at my lowest. He was charming, financially savvy, and seemed to genuinely care about both of us. By the time I realized my mistake, we were married, and he had legal access to our finances. Things changed after the wedding. Marcus became controlling, isolating me from Peter and our other friends. He convinced me to add his name to accounts, to sign papers I didn't fully understand. When I finally began to question him, to push back, I discovered my cancer had returned. The timing was convenient. Too convenient. I can't prove anything, but there were pills he insisted I take for anxiety. After I stopped taking them, some of my symptoms improved, at least temporarily. I know how this sounds, Emma, like the paranoid suspicions of a dying woman. Perhaps that's all they are. But in case I'm right, I've been gathering evidence. Everything is in a lockbox at the lakeside cabin. The key is taped inside your father's favorite book, the first edition. Hemingway in his study. If Marcus hasn't already sold it. Go to the cabin, Emma, find the lockbox. Inside is everything you need to reclaim what's rightfully yours, and possibly to understand what really happened to me. Be careful. If my suspicions are correct, Marcus is dangerous when threatened. Don't confront him alone. Trust Peter. Trust William Jenkins. Both know pieces of what I've discovered, though neither knows the full story. I wish I could have told you this in person, held your hand through this nightmare. But if Marcus suspected what I knew, what I was planning. I love you more than life, my brave girl. You are stronger than you know. Your father's daughter through and through. Find the truth. Reclaim your inheritance. And forgive me for not being brave enough sooner. All my love. Mom. I read the letter twice, my hands shaking so badly the pages rattled. Mom's words seemed impossible, like something from a thriller novel rather than my actual life. Marcus drugging her, stealing my inheritance, potentially harming her, and yet, it explained so much. The growing distance between us in recent years, her increasing isolation, the rapid deterioration in her health that had shocked even her doctors. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope, then pressed the intercom button Jenkins had pointed out before leaving. "I'm ready," I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded when my entire world had just shifted on its axis. Jenkins returned promptly, resuming his seat across from me. "I understand this must be overwhelming." "Did you know?" I asked. "What was in her letter?" He shook his head. "Rachel didn't share the contents with me. She only asked that I prepare certain documents and manage the timing of their delivery." He removed more papers from his folder. "Which brings us to the legal matters at hand. Your mother executed a new will 3 months ago, naming you as her sole beneficiary and removing Marcus Winters as executor." "Can she do that? They were married." "In most cases, a spouse has certain rights that can't be overridden. However, Rachel was thorough in her documentation." Jenkins slid several papers across the table. "These are copies of financial records indicating that Marcus may have committed fraud, transferring funds from her accounts without authorization, forging her signature on loan documents, and most seriously, potentially embezzling from your trust fund." I stared at the papers, recognizing Mom's meticulous record-keeping. This is why she set up the meeting for 3 weeks after her death. She knew Marcus would show his hand. "Yes," Jenkins agreed. "Rachel suspected he would move quickly once she was gone, liquidating assets, possibly selling the house. She wanted evidence of his actions before we challenged him legally." "He kicked me out yesterday," I said. "Claimed the mortgage was in his name. Said he needed the space for a home office." Jenkins made a note. "That aligns with what we anticipated. Did he say anything about selling the house?" "No, but my uncle thinks that's his plan. He's in financial trouble, a development deal that went bad." "The Riverfront Towers project," Jenkins nodded. "Several of my clients lost money there. Marcus was the primary broker, and from what I understand, he leveraged himself heavily." I thought about Mom's letter, about the lockbox at the cabin. "There's more evidence," I said. "At our family cabin by the lake. Mom said she's been gathering proof." Jenkins leaned forward. "This is very important, Emma. Have you told Marcus about this meeting?" "No. Mom's letter said not to trust him." "Good. We need to secure that evidence before he realizes what's happening." Jenkins checked his watch. "I can file for an emergency injunction this afternoon to prevent him from selling any assets from your mother's estate, including the house. But for it to be most effective, we need whatever proof your mother collected." "I can go to the cabin." "Today?" I said. "Right now." Jenkins nodded approvingly. "I'll call Judge Harriman. He was a friend of your father's. He'll expedite the paperwork. In the meantime, say nothing to Marcus. If he contacts you, be vague. Don't let him know we're building a case." As I stood to leave, Jenkins handed me a business card. "My cell number is on the back. Call me immediately when you find the lockbox. And Emma, be careful. People who commit financial fraud rarely stop there when cornered." I left the law office in a daze, clutching my mother's letter and Jenkins's card. The world looked different now, sharper, more dangerous. The comfortable suburban life I'd known had been a facade, concealing something much darker. My phone buzzed with a text. From Marcus. "Need to discuss remaining items at house. Come by tomorrow morning." I stared at the message, seeing it through the lens of my mother's suspicions. Not a stepdad trying to help me collect my belongings, but a con man trying to assess what I knew, what I suspected. I texted back, "Okay," then immediately called Peter. "How did it go?" he asked when he answered. "We need to go to the cabin," I said. "Now. I'll explain everything on the way." 20 minutes later, I was in Peter's car, heading toward the lakeside cabin that had been our family's weekend retreat, for generations. As we drove, I told him everything. Mom's letter, Jenkins's revelations, the lockbox of evidence. Peter listened in grim silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When I finished, he said, "I knew something was wrong, the way Rachel changed after marrying him. It was like watching my sister disappear by inches." "Do you think I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Peter's jaw tightened. "I don't know, Emma, but we're going to find out." The cabin came into view as we rounded the final curve, a small A-frame structure nestled among pine trees, its deck extending over the water. In happier times, we'd spent summers swimming from that deck, winters huddled by the stone fireplace. Now it looked abandoned, fallen leaves coating the roof, the windows dark and shuttered. "When was the last time anyone was here?" I asked as Peter parked. "Your mother mentioned coming up a few months ago," Peter said. "Said she needed to check for storm damage." The key was still hidden in the same spot, under a false rock by the back door. Inside, the cabin was cold but undisturbed. Dust covers draped the furniture, and the air smelled of pine and disuse. "Mom said the key to the lockbox is in Dad's favorite book," I said, heading toward the small bookshelf in the living room. "A first edition Hemingway." Peter frowned. "The Old Man and the Sea? But that's at your house, in Michael's study." My heart sank. "Marcus has probably sold it by now, along with everything else." "Maybe not," Peter said thoughtfully. "The first editions were all cataloged as part of Michael's collection. Anyone legitimate would want documentation of provenance before buying. It would take time to sell them properly." "So they might still be at the house?" "It's possible, but we need to check here first. Rachel was clever. She might have left a backup." We searched the cabin systematically, starting with the bookshelves and moving through drawers, cabinets, even checking loose floorboards. In the master bedroom closet, Peter found a shoebox filled with old photographs. "Look at this," he said, showing me a picture of Mom and Dad on their wedding day, standing on the very deck outside. The Hemingway reference might have been misdirection, a message only you would understand. I studied the photo, noticing how young and happy they looked. Behind them, barely visible in the background, was a small structure at the edge of the property. "The boathouse," I said suddenly. Dad proposed to Mom in the boathouse. He gave her a first edition of their favorite book as an engagement present. Peter's eyes widened. "It's worth checking." The boathouse was little more than a shed perched at the water's edge. Inside, cobwebs draped the corners, and the old rowboat listed to one side, its hull dry rotted from years of disuse. "Look, for anything out of place," Peter suggested, examining the walls. I scanned the small space, trying to think like Mom. What would she consider secure but accessible? My gaze landed on a loose board in the far corner, partially concealed by an ancient life vest. "There," I pointed. "That board doesn't match the others." Peter knelt, pulling away the life vest. The board came away easily, revealing a small niche behind it. Inside was a metal key attached to a faded leather tag. "Property of James River First National," Peter read. "A safe deposit box?" "No," I said, remembering Jenkins's words. "A lockbox. Mom said everything was in a lockbox here at the cabin." We resumed our search with renewed determination. Finally, in the crawl space under the cabin, Peter discovered a metal lockbox bolted to the foundation. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a USB drive, a small notebook in Mom's handwriting, several legal documents, and a voice recorder. On top was a note. "Emma, this is everything. Be brave. Love, Mom." Peter handled the lockbox reverently. "We need to get this to Jenkins right away." As we carefully repacked the contents, my phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "Changed my mind. Coming by Peter's place tonight to discuss next steps." 7 p.m. I showed Peter the message. He's getting impatient. "Or nervous," Peter said. "If he's been to the house study and found the Hemingway missing." He might suspect something, I finished. We need to hurry. The sky was darkening as we drove back toward Riverside, the lockbox secure in my lap. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier, drumming on the car roof. I'll drop you at Jenkins's office, Peter decided. I'll lead Marcus to believe you're running errands if he shows up early. I nodded, staring out at the rain-slicked roads. Do you think Mom was right? About Marcus possibly hurting her? Peter was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Emma. But Rachel wasn't one for paranoid fantasies. If she suspected something, there was likely a reason. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm as we drove in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I clutched the lockbox tighter, feeling the weight of its contents. The truth about my mother's life and death, the evidence of Marcus's betrayal, the key to reclaiming my inheritance, and perhaps justice for Mom. What I didn't know then, couldn't have known, was that Marcus was already one step ahead of us. That even as we raced toward Riverside with our precious evidence, he was at Peter's bookstore, searching for me. That the confrontation my mother had feared was coming sooner than anyone anticipated. And that by morning, the truth would change everything, especially for Marcus Winters, the man who thought he'd gotten away with the perfect crime. Jenkins's office was still lit when we arrived, despite the late hour. The elderly receptionist had been replaced by a younger man who introduced himself as Jenkins's son and legal partner, David. My father's expecting you, he said, leading us through the quiet building to a conference room where William Jenkins waited, his desk covered with legal documents. You found it, he said, eyeing the lockbox in my arms. Under the cabin, I confirmed, setting it on the table. Mom left very specific clues. Jenkins carefully examined the contents, his expression growing grimmer with each document he reviewed. Your mother was thorough, he said finally. Bank statements showing unauthorized transfers, loan applications with suspicious signatures, recordings of phone calls. He held up the voice recorder. This could be particularly damning. Peter leaned forward. Is it enough to stop him from selling the house? More than enough for an injunction, Jenkins said. Potentially enough for criminal charges, depending on what's on this recorder and USB drive. He glanced at the clock. Judge Harriman is waiting for my call. With these documents, we can file for emergency relief tonight. Marcus is expecting to meet me at 7, I said, showing him the text. At Peter's bookstore. Jenkins frowned. That complicates things. Ideally, we'd serve him with the injunction when he's not expecting it. He tapped the notebook thoughtfully. On the other hand, a controlled confrontation might work to our advantage. What do you mean? Peter asked. If Emma meets with him as planned, keeps him talking while wearing a recording device. Jenkins looked at me. It's risky. But additional evidence of his intentions, in his own words, would strengthen our case considerably. I'll do it, I said immediately, if it helps stop him. Peter shook his head. It's too dangerous. From what Rachel wrote, I'll have an officer present, Jenkins interrupted. Not in the room, but nearby, as a precaution. I want to do this, I insisted. For Mom. Jenkins studied me, then nodded. Your mother had the same determination. He reached for his phone. Let me call Harriman, then Detective Collins. We need to move quickly. While Jenkins made his calls, I examined the USB drive, wondering what secrets it contained. Peter squeezed my shoulder supportively. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. We have enough evidence already. Yes, I do, I replied. Mom spent her final months gathering this evidence, knowing she might not live to use it. I need to finish what she started. Jenkins returned, accompanied by a trim, middle-aged woman in plain clothes with an unmistakable air of authority. Emma, this is Detective Collins, Jenkins introduced us. She'll be coordinating the operation tonight. Operation seems a bit dramatic for serving papers, Collins said with a wry smile. But given the allegations, we're taking precautions. She set a small recording device on the table. This will capture anything said within 20 feet. All you need to do is keep it in your pocket and get Winters talking about the house, your mother's belongings, the trust fund, anything related to your inheritance. I'm coming too, Peter stated firmly. Collins nodded. Good. Having you, there initially will seem natural. You'll step away during the conversation, make an excuse about helping a customer or taking a phone call, but you'll be nearby. What if Marcus gets suspicious? I asked, or angry. That's why I'll be posing as a customer in the bookstore, Collins explained. At the first sign of trouble, I intervene. But remember, our goal is evidence collection, not confrontation. Jenkins returned with papers bearing an official seal. The injunction is approved. Once we have tonight's recording, we'll serve Marcus with these, preferably in public to prevent any scene. The plan was set. At 6:30, Peter and I returned. To the bookstore, Collins arrived separately, browsing the mystery section with remarkable conviction for someone on an undercover operation. The recording device felt heavy in my jacket pocket, a tangible reminder of the stakes. You'll be fine, Peter assured. Me, arranging books at the counter. Just remember what Collins said. Keep him talking, don't confront him directly. At precisely 7 on, the bell above the door chimed. Marcus entered, shaking rain from his umbrella. He looked impeccable as always. Tailored suit, polished shoes, not a hair out of place. Looking at him now, knowing what I knew, I wondered how I'd never seen the calculation behind his smile. Emma, he greeted me with practiced warmth. And, Peter, thank you for accommodating me on such short notice. Of course, Peter replied neutrally. Emma mentioned you wanted to discuss her remaining belongings. Among other things. Marcus glanced around the bookstore. Is there somewhere more private we could talk? Peter gestured toward the reading nook in the back corner. Cozy armchairs partially screened by bookshelves, offering the illusion of privacy while remaining visible from Collins's position. I need to finish inventorying these new arrivals, Peter said, but I'll be right at the counter if you need anything. Marcus waited until Peter walked away before speaking. How? Are you settling in? This must be quite an adjustment. It's been difficult, I said truthfully, leaving my home so suddenly. These transitions are always challenging, Marcus agreed smoothly, but sometimes necessary, which is actually why I wanted to speak with you. He leaned forward, voice lowering confidentially. I've been offered a job in Seattle, a significant promotion, heading up the West Coast division of my real estate firm. This was unexpected. You're moving? We all are in one way or another. He smiled thinly. I'll be putting the house on the market next week. Before I do, I wanted to give you one last chance to collect any remaining sentimental items. The recording device pressed against my ribs, reminding me of my purpose. That's generous of you. What about Mom's things? Her jewelry, the family albums? As I mentioned, most have been donated, Marcus said dismissively. The market for secondhand items isn't what it used to be. Even her sapphire necklace, the one from Grandma? A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed Marcus's face. Your mother sold that piece years ago, Emma. Medical treatments are expensive. That's strange, I said, watching him carefully. Mom wore it to your company Christmas party last December. I saw the photos. Marcus paused, recalibrating. Perhaps I'm misremembering. There were so many expenses, so many decisions during her illness. He straightened his cuffs, a nervous gesture I'd noticed over the years. Regardless, I wanted to discuss your future. My future? Yes. I've set aside a small sum, $5,000, to help you get established. A fresh start, as it were. His smile didn't reach his eyes. The money will be transferred to your account once the house sale closes. $5,000. A fraction of what my trust fund had contained. A pittance compared to the value of the house my father had renovated. The audacity was breathtaking. That's very thoughtful, I managed. I'm also arranging to have your father's books appraised, Marcus continued. Several dealers have expressed interest in the first editions. Once sold, I could increase your stipend, say to $7,000. My father's beloved book collection, the first edition Hemingway that held the key Mom had mentioned, the Fitzgerald he'd read aloud on summer evenings, the Steinbeck he'd inherited from his own father, all reduced to potential cash in Marcus's mind. I thought those books belonged to me, I said. Dad's will. Your father's will left everything to your mother, Marcus cut in smoothly. And as her husband, I inherited her estate. But Mom had her own will, didn't she? I pressed, heart pounding. After her diagnosis? Marcus's facade slipped slightly. Any documents Rachel signed while on heavy medication would be legally questionable. Her doctors confirmed she was often confused, especially near the end. The casual cruelty of his dismissal made my hands shake. I clasped them in my lap to hide my reaction. I'm trying to be generous here, Emma, Marcus continued. Many step-parents would simply wash their hands of the situation entirely. No legal obligation remains once you've turned 18. No moral obligation either, apparently. I couldn't help adding. His eyes hardened. I was there for your mother when she needed me. I managed her finances, coordinated her care, made difficult decisions while you were away at school, enjoying campus life. I wanted to come home, I countered. You told me not to, said it would upset her too much. Because it would have. Marcus leaned back, mask firmly back in place. Rachel wanted you to have a normal college experience, not watch her waste away. I respected her wishes, even when it meant shouldering the burden alone. The recorder captured it all. His lies, his manipulations, the careful narrative he'd constructed to justify his actions. I needed to push further, get him to reveal more about the financial aspects. What happened to my college fund? I asked directly. The trust Dad set up? Marcus's expression flickered again. Surprise, quickly masked. There was no trust, Emma. Just a modest life insurance policy that barely covered the mortgage refinancing after Michael died. That's not what Mom told me, I lied. She mentioned a specific fund for my education. Rachel was confused about many things near the end, Marcus said, his tone softening with false sympathy. The cancer treatments affected her memory, her perception. The doctors warned this might happen. She seemed pretty clear-minded to me. Marcus tensed, just slightly. When did you last speak with her? Before her passing? I realized with a jolt that he was fishing for information, trying to determine if Mom had revealed anything damning during our final conversations. We texted regularly, I said vaguely, and spoke on the phone. About finances? His casual tone couldn't disguise the intensity of his interest. About lots of things. I met his gaze steadily. Mom always said honesty was important in families. Something cold flickered in his eyes. Indeed, which is why I'm being straightforward with you now. The house sale proceeds will help settle some outstanding medical debts and provide you with a modest start. That's the reality of the situation. From across the store, Peter caught my eye, tapping his watch subtly. We'd been talking for almost 30 minutes, long enough to gather substantial evidence. I should let you get back to your evening, Marcus said, rising smoothly. I'll text you when the house is ready for your final visit. Thursday, perhaps. I have a question first, I said, remaining seated. About Mom's jewelry. If it wasn't donated and she didn't sell it as you suggested earlier, where is it? Marcus stilled. I told you. You told me 2 different stories in the space of 10 minutes, I interrupted, neither of which can be true. His expression hardened. I don't appreciate your tone, Emma, or these implications. Just like you didn't appreciate Mom questioning the refinance documents or asking about my trust fund. Marcus glanced around the bookstore, noticing for the first time that several customers, Collins and 2 plainclothes officers, were positioned strategically near exits. I'm not sure what you think you know, he said quietly, but grief can distort perceptions, make us look for someone to blame. I don't think grief forged bank documents, I replied, or emptied trust accounts, or sold family heirlooms. Marcus's calm facade cracked just for a moment. Whatever Rachel told you, she told me enough, I cut him off, and left evidence of the rest. He took a step toward me, then stopped as Collins approached, casually holding up her badge. Mr. Winters? Detective Collins, Riverside PD. I believe you have an appointment at the station to discuss some financial discrepancies. Marcus's face drained of color. This is a family matter, a misunderstanding. Fraud isn't a family matter, Collins replied. Neither is theft or potential criminal negligence in the death of Rachel Parker. Death of... Marcus sputtered. That's absurd. Rachel died of... cancer. Did she? Collins nodded to one of her officers, who handed Marcus an envelope. This is a court order for the medical examiner to review Rachel Parker's remains and medical records. And this, she produced another document, is an injunction preventing you from selling, transferring, or removing any assets from the Parker estate, including the house and all its contents. Marcus's composure evaporated entirely. You can't do this. I have rights. Rights that don't include defrauding your stepdaughter or potentially contributing to your wife's death, Collins interrupted calmly. We can continue this conversation at the station. My officers will escort you. As the officers led a shell-shocked Marcus toward the door, Collins turned to me. Good work. You kept your cool, got him talking. The recording should be useful. I nodded, suddenly exhausted now that the confrontation was over. What happens now? Forensic accountants will go through the evidence your mother collected, plus whatever we find during the investigation. If the medical examiner finds anything suspicious regarding your mother's death... She left the sentence unfinished. Could he really have? I couldn't bring myself to complete the thought. We'll find out, Collins promised. In the meantime, that injunction ensures the house and all assets remain untouched. Mr. Jenkins is petitioning for emergency. Probate proceedings to recognize your mother's will instead of the inheritance laws Marcus was counting on. Peter joined us, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. Is it over? He asked. Just beginning, Collins replied. But the hardest part, confronting him, is done. Emma did exceptionally well. After Collins left, Peter closed the bookstore. Early. We climbed the stairs to the apartment in silence, the events of the day weighing heavily on us both. Are you okay? Peter asked as he made tea, Mom's remedy for difficult days. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me feels relieved. Another part is terrified about what the investigation might find about Mom's death. Peter set a steaming mug before me. One day at a time, Emma. That's all we can manage right now. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenkins. Hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. Be at courthouse by 9 a.m. Marcus being held overnight on preliminary fraud charges. I showed Peter the message. It's moving so fast. Jenkins works quickly. When motivated, Peter noted. And having a judge who is friends with your father helps. Do you think we'll get the house back? The injunction already prevents Marcus from selling it, Peter reminded me. The hearing tomorrow will determine temporary control of all assets while the full case proceeds. I sipped my tea, trying to process everything. I keep thinking about what Mom wrote, that she suspected Marcus of tampering with her medication. Could he really have? Rachel wasn't prone to paranoia, Peter said carefully. If she suspected something, there was likely a reason. The medical examiner will be thorough, especially with Collins pushing the investigation. Sleep was elusive that night. I tossed on the futon, my mind replaying the confrontation with Marcus, the revelations of the day, the horrible possibility that my mother's death hadn't been entirely natural. Around dawn, I gave up trying to rest and instead prepared for the court hearing, choosing the most professional outfit I owned, a charcoal blazer Mom had given me for college interviews and the pearl earrings that had been her mother's. Peter made breakfast, though neither of us ate much. The courthouse loomed ahead as we parked, its limestone facade imposing in the morning light. Jenkins met us on the steps, briefcase in hand. Marcus's attorney requested a continuance, but Judge Harriman denied it. This is unusual, having a hearing so quickly, but the circumstances are exceptional. What should I expect? I asked as we climbed the steps. Judge Harriman will review the emergency petition, hear arguments from both sides, and make a preliminary ruling on the estate's management during the investigation. You may be asked a few questions, but I'll handle most of the presentation. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, with wooden benches and subdued lighting. Marcus sat at the defense table with an attorney I didn't recognize, an expensively dressed woman who exuded confidence. When Marcus saw me, his expression darkened briefly before he composed himself. "Ignore him," Jenkins murmured, guiding me to our table. "Focus on the judge." Judge Harriman was a silver-haired man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. When he entered, the bailiff called the court to order, and the proceedings began. "This is an emergency hearing regarding the estate of Rachel Parker, Judge Giao," Harriman announced. "Mr. Jenkins, you may present your petition." Jenkins rose, outlining Mom's will, the evidence of financial impropriety, and the need to protect the estate's assets during the investigation. He presented the documents from Mom's lockbox, the recording from last night, and affidavits from the forensic accountant who had begun reviewing the financial records. Marcus's attorney, Ms. Prescott, countered that as Rachel's legal husband, Marcus had authority to manage their joint assets. She characterized Mom's accusations as the confused ramblings of a terminally ill woman and suggested that any missing funds were related to medical expenses. "Your Honor," Jenkins responded, "the document trail shows systematic fraud dating back nearly 4 years, long before Mrs. Parker's illness. Moreover, the trust fund established for Emma Parker was legally separate from marital assets. Yet Mr. Winters transferred those funds to accounts only he controlled." Judge Harriman turned to Marcus. "Mr. Winters, these are serious allegations. Evidence suggests you may have misappropriated in excess of $200,000 from your stepdaughter's trust alone, not counting the questionable refinancing of the family home." Marcus leaned forward to whisper urgently to his attorney, who then addressed the court. "Your Honor, my client is prepared to allow Ms. Parker access to her personal belongings at the family residence, but maintains that as joint owner of the property, he has legitimate claim to—" "Joint owner?" Jenkins interrupted. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Winters added his name to the deed through a forged document. Rachel Parker's signature on the transfer doesn't match exemplars from the same period, as our handwriting expert will testify." Ms. Prescott seemed surprised by this revelation. After conferring with Marcus again, her approach shifted. "Your Honor, rather than prolonging these proceedings, perhaps a settlement could be reached. Mr. Winters is willing to allow Ms. Parker to recover her trust fund amount in exchange for releasing any claim to the house." Jenkins shook his head. "The house's current market value exceeds $650,000, Your Honor. The trust contained approximately $120,000. Mr. Winters is attempting to retain stolen property by returning only a fraction of what he took." Judge Harriman studied the documents before him carefully. Given the evidence presented, I'm inclined to grant the emergency petition. The assets of Rachel Parker's estate, including the family home and all contents, will be frozen pending full investigation. Mr. Winters is prohibited from accessing, selling, or transferring any property connected to the estate. He looked directly at Marcus. Furthermore, given the potential criminal charges, I'm ordering an asset freeze on Mr. Winters' personal accounts as well. Marcus half rose from his seat. You can't. Sit down, Mr. Winters, Judge Harriman said sharply. Your attorney can file objections through proper channels. He turned to me. Miss Parker, as the named beneficiary in your mother's most recent will, I'm granting you temporary residence rights to the family home during these proceedings. Mr. Jenkins will arrange for supervised access to collect your belongings immediately, and full access once the police have completed their evidence collection. The gavel fell, and just like that, the hearing was over. Marcus stalked from the courtroom without looking at me, his attorney hurrying to keep pace. What happens now? I asked Jenkins as we gathered our papers. Detective Collins will coordinate with you to access the house today, to retrieve necessities, and check for any additional evidence your mother might have hidden there. The forensic accountants continue their work, and the medical examiner should have preliminary findings by early next week. Peter squeezed my shoulder supportively. One step at a time. Detective Collins met us outside the courthouse, her unmarked car idling at the curb. Ready to go home? She asked. The word home hit me with unexpected force. After weeks of feeling adrift, the prospect of returning to the house where I'd grown up, not as a visitor gathering scraps of my former life, but as its rightful occupant, was overwhelming. Yes, I managed. Very ready. The drive was silent, each of us lost in thought. As we turned onto my street, I noticed a police cruiser parked in front of the house, officers maintaining the integrity of what was now potentially a crime scene. We've already photographed and cataloged most of the interior, Collins explained as we approached the front door. You can collect personal items today, but some areas remain restricted until the investigation concludes. The key felt strange in my hand, heavier somehow than when I'd surrendered it to Marcus just days ago. The door swung open to reveal the familiar entryway, now marked with evidence tags on certain items. The antique side table where Mom had always left her keys, the decorative box on the mantel, the small painting in the hallway that I suddenly realized might be more valuable than I'd known. Marcus has expensive taste, Collins remarked, following my gaze. Our art expert identified several pieces worth significant sums, all purchased within the last 2 years. While I collected clothes and personal mementos from my bedroom, Collins and another officer examined my father's study, the room Marcus had been transforming into his home office, and the likely location of important financial documents. Emma, Collins called. Could you come here for a moment? Dad's study had been ransacked. The built-in bookshelves that had once housed his precious first editions stood empty. The books piled haphazardly in cardboard boxes labeled, "For Appraisal." His desk drawers hung open, their contents partially removed. We found this hidden in the lining of your father's desk drawer, Collins said, holding up a small key. Any idea what it might open? I examined it. Not a house key, too small. For a padlock. It could be for a safe deposit box. Mom mentioned bank records in her letter. We'll check with local banks, Collins nodded. In the meantime, is there anywhere else your mother might have hidden important documents? She was clearly concerned about keeping evidence away from Marcus. I scanned the room, trying to think like Mom. The empty bookshelves caught my attention. Specifically, the first edition Hemingway Mom had mentioned in her letter. The Old Man and the Sea, I said. Mom wrote that she hid something in that book, a key to a lockbox. It should be here somewhere. We searched through the boxes of books, eventually, finding the valuable first edition wrapped in acid-free paper at the bottom of the third box. Carefully, I opened it, checking between pages, inside the cover, along the binding. There! Collins pointed to a slight bulge in the back cover's lining. With forensic precision, she slit the fabric, revealing a small metal key taped securely inside. Another safe deposit box? I wondered. Or another lockbox, Peter suggested. Your mother was nothing if not thorough. Collins bagged the key as evidence. We'll figure out what it opens. In the meantime, gather what you need for the next few days. The house remains under police supervision, but Judge Harriman's order allows you to move back in once we complete the initial investigation, probably by week's end. As I packed essentials into a suitcase, the reality of the situation settled over me. Mom's suspicions had been validated. Marcus had systematically stolen my inheritance, perhaps contributed to her death, and nearly gotten away with it all. Yet questions remained. What else had Mom hidden? What would the medical examiner find? And how had Marcus, seemingly so successful, ended up desperate enough to target a librarian and her teenage daughter in the first place? That evening, back at Peter's apartment, Jenkins called with updates. The forensic accountants have traced most of the missing trust fund, he reported. Marcus transferred it through several accounts before using it to cover margin calls on personal investments. They're still tracking the assets from the house refinancing. What about the key we found in Dad's book? I asked. Detective Collins is working on that, Jenkins said. They've checked with major banks in Riverside. No safe deposit box under your mother's name or yours. It might be under another name, or possibly not a bank box at all. After hanging up, I sifted through the few photos I'd retrieved from the house, finding comfort in the visual reminders of happier times. One showed Mom, Dad, and me at the lakeside cabin, standing proudly on the dock Dad had built the summer before his accident. Another captured Mom and Peter at a bookstore event, surrounded by local authors. The last photo made me pause. Mom with her colleagues from the library at a retirement party for the head librarian, Mrs. Winters. Mrs. Winters. The name triggered a sudden connection. Peter, I called, showing him the photo. Marcus's mother was the head librarian where Mom worked, wasn't she? Peter studied the picture. Eleanor Winters. Yes, she retired about 6 years ago. Why? That's how Mom met Marcus, I realized. At his mother's retirement party. Probably, Peter agreed. Eleanor introduced them, as I recall. I searched through my phone until I found the news article about the Riverfront Towers project, Marcus's failed development. There, buried, in the list of investors who'd lost money, was Eleanor Winters. His own mother was an investor in the project that failed, I said. What if Marcus didn't just randomly target Mom? What if we were part of a larger scheme? Peter's expression grew concerned. What are you thinking? Marcus needed money to cover his losses and pay back investors, including his mother. He uses his connection through her to meet Mom, a vulnerable widow with a valuable house, a trust fund for her daughter, and limited financial expertise. It's possible, Peter acknowledged, but proving intent from the beginning would be difficult. Maybe not, I said, remembering something. The key we found in Dad's book. What if it's not for a bank box at all? What if it's for something at the library? Mom worked there for years. She'd know all the secure places. Peter's eyes widened. The rare book room. It has individual lockboxes for researchers and special collections. He checked his watch. The library's closed now, but we could go first thing tomorrow. I nodded, a sense of purpose driving away the fatigue. Then, we'll have answers about how Marcus chose us, about what Mom knew, maybe even about how he tampered with her medication. One step at a time, Peter cautioned. We've already accomplished so much in just a few days. I know, I said. But I can't stop now, not when we're so close to understanding everything. That night, I dreamed of Mom, not sick and diminished as she'd been at the end, but strong and determined, the way she'd been throughout my childhood. In the dream, she stood in Dad's study, placing papers inside a book, her expression resolute. "Find the truth," Dream Mom said. "It's all there, waiting for you." I woke with first light, the dream still vivid. Outside, rain tapped against the window, but nothing could dampen my determination. Today, we would visit the library. Today, we would unlock the final secrets Marcus had tried to bury. Today, I would finish what Mom had started and bring justice, not just for myself, but for her. The Riverside Public Library stood like a sentinel in the morning mist, its red brick Victorian architecture a stark contrast to the modern glass buildings surrounding it. For 20 years, this had been Mom's workplace, her sanctuary even, especially after Dad died. I'd spent countless afternoons here as a child, doing homework at the corner table while she shelved books or helped patrons. Now I approached it with a different purpose, the small key from Dad's book clutched tightly in my palm. Peter had called ahead to Sharon, the current head librarian and Mom's former colleague, explaining our situation in general terms. She was waiting for us at the staff entrance, her face solemn. "Emma," she embraced me warmly. I was heartbroken to hear about Rachel, and now all this business with Marcus. She shook her head disapprovingly. I never trusted that man. Something about him seemed calculated. "You're not the only one who felt that way," Peter replied as Sharon led us through the staff area toward the rare books room. "Rachel changed after marrying him," Sharon continued, lowering her voice. "Though the library wasn't yet open to the public, stopped joining us for lunch, missed staff events, eventually reduced her hours to part-time, then left entirely after her diagnosis." She unlocked the rare books room with a keycard. Eleanor, Marcus's mother, was devastated when Rachel resigned. They'd been quite close. This was new information. "Eleanor and Mom were friends?" I asked. "Very much so," Sharon confirmed. "Eleanor practically mentored Rachel when she first started here as a page during college. After your father died, Eleanor was Rachel's primary support system, until Marcus entered the picture." Peter and I exchanged significant glances. The connection between Marcus and Mom hadn't been random at all, but deliberately cultivated through his mother. The rare books room was climate-controlled and dimly lit to protect the valuable volumes. Along one wall stood a series of secure lockboxes for researchers and special collections. "The key is for one of these?" Sharon asked, examining it. "We think so," I replied. "Mom mentioned hiding important documents where Marcus wouldn't think to look." Sharon studied the key's distinctive pattern. "This would be for the research. Lockers. They're numbered. Do you know which one?" I shook my head. The note didn't specify. "Then we'll have to try them all," Peter said pragmatically. Sharon led us to the back wall where 12 metal lockers were mounted, each about the size of a small filing cabinet drawer. "Researchers use these for materials they're working with over extended periods," she explained. "Rachel had access to all of them as part of her job." The key fit none of the first 11 lockers. As I approached the final box, positioned in the corner and partially obscured by a display case, I noticed something, a tiny flower sticker, faded but visible on the locker's edge. Mom had used similar stickers to mark my books as a child. "This one," I said with sudden certainty. The key slid in perfectly, turning with a satisfying click. Inside was a thick manila envelope sealed with tape and labeled simply, "Evidence." "Is there somewhere private we could examine this?" Peter asked Sharon. She led us to the library's conference room, bringing coffee while we carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several file folders, each meticulously labeled in Mom's precise handwriting. Financial records, Marcus background, medical, and Eleanor. "Eleanor has her own file?" Peter looked surprised. "Let's find out why," I said, opening it first. The contents painted a disturbing picture. newspaper clippings about Eleanor Winters's financial difficulties after retirement, medical bills showing treatments for a condition requiring expensive medication not covered by insurance, letters from a debt collection agency, and most significantly, bank statements showing large transfers from Eleanor's accounts to Marcus's around the time the Riverfront Towers project began collapsing. "He took his own mother's money," I whispered, horrified. "Not just took," Peter observed, pointing to loan documents with Eleanor's shaky signature. "He appears to have convinced her to mortgage her home to invest in his project." The Marcus background folder contained more revelations. Background checks Mom had apparently commissioned through a private investigator, credit reports showing mounting debt. And most damning, records of 3 previous relationships with older, financially comfortable women, each ending after Marcus had gained control of significant assets. "This wasn't his first time," Peter said grimly. "Rachel was the 4th. But the first with a child involved," I noted, remembering the trust fund Marcus had systematically emptied. The first where he actually married his target. The financial records folder contained documentation we'd already discovered through other means: unauthorized transfers, forged signatures, manipulated account statements that Marcus had shown Mom to hide his activities. With trepidation, I opened the final folder labeled Medical. Inside were Mom's prescription records, showing medications I'd never heard her mention. Attached was a handwritten note. "Suspicious timing of symptoms worsening after starting anxiety medication," Marcus insisted upon. Dr. Collins unaware of this prescription, not in medical records. "Pills appear different from pharmacy description. Sending sample for testing. See attached lab report." The lab report, dated just 3 weeks before Mom died, confirmed her suspicions. The pills contained trace amounts of a compound that could accelerate cancer progression in patients with her specific condition. My hands shook so violently that Peter had to take the papers. "This is monstrous," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He was poisoning her," I whispered, "slowly killing her while pretending to care for her." "We need to call Detective Collins immediately," Peter said, already reaching for his phone. While Peter spoke with Collins, I examined the remaining contents of the envelope. A small flash drive and a handwritten letter addressed to me, sealed in its own envelope. Unlike the evidence documents, this was personal, in Mom's familiar handwriting, the paper infused with her favorite lavender. Stationery scent. "My dearest Emma," it began. "If you're reading this, you found the final pieces of the puzzle I've been assembling. I'm so sorry to leave you with this burden, but I couldn't risk confronting Marcus directly once I realized the full scope of his actions. I never expected to find love again after your father died. When Marcus appeared, charming, attentive, seemingly devoted, I was vulnerable to his manipulation. By the time I recognized the signs, we were married, and he had already begun isolating me from Peter and our friends. The financial deception I discovered accidentally, noticing discrepancies in bank statements, questioning withdrawals Marcus couldn't explain. When I began investigating, I found the pattern. Eleanor first, then me, with others before us. This wasn't opportunistic, it was calculated. A systematic targeting of vulnerable women with significant assets. The medical aspect is harder to write about. I cannot prove definitively that Marcus has been tampering with my medication, but the evidence is compelling enough that I've documented everything for potential criminal investigation. If something happens to me before I can expose him, this file ensures he won't escape justice or harm anyone else. Most importantly, I've ensured that your inheritance remains protected through measures Marcus doesn't know about. The cabin property was never in my name. Your father placed it in a separate trust for you, with Peter as trustee. The life insurance policy Marcus believes names him as beneficiary was changed last month through my attorney. And the most valuable asset, the original copy of your father's will and trust documents, is in the safe deposit box this key opens." A small key fell from the envelope as I unfolded the second page. Jenkins has copies of everything, but the originals establish beyond doubt that the house and trust fund were always meant for you. The trust documentation explicitly prevents any spouse of mine from accessing these assets, a protection Michael insisted upon that I foolishly tried to circumvent when I married Marcus. I hope you never read this letter. I hope I recover enough strength to confront Marcus myself, to protect you from this terrible knowledge. But if I cannot, know that my love for you transcends whatever happens to me. Your strength and intelligence will guide you through this darkness, just as they have through every challenge you've faced. Find happiness, Emma. Reclaim what is rightfully yours. And forgive me for not seeing the truth about Marcus until it was almost too late. All my love, always. Mom. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. Peter had concluded his call with Detective Collins and sat beside me, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. "She's sending officers to secure the evidence," he said, "and contacting the DA about upgrading the charges against Marcus." I handed him Mom's letter wordlessly. As he read, his expression shifted from sorrow to determination. "Rachel knew exactly what she was doing," he said finally. "Creating a paper trail, documenting everything, protecting your inheritance through multiple channels." "She knew he was killing her," I whispered, "and still had the presence of mind to plan all this." "That was Rachel," Peter said, his voice breaking slightly. "Always thinking 3 steps ahead, just like your father." Sharon knocked softly before entering the conference room. "Detective Collins is here," she announced. Collins entered briskly, accompanied by a forensic technician who immediately began documenting and securing the evidence. "This changes everything," Collins said after reviewing the files. "We're looking at potential first-degree murder charges, in addition to fraud, forgery, and elder abuse regarding Eleanor Winters." "Elder abuse?" I questioned. "Based on what you've found, we contacted Eleanor this morning," Collins explained. "She's been in a care facility for the past 6 months, early-stage dementia. Marcus holds her power of attorney and controls all her finances. The facility reports that he rarely visits and has repeatedly reduced her care package to the minimum, covered by Medicare. The cruelty seemed boundless." "His own mother," I murmured, disgusted. "Narcissists typically view everyone as potential resources to be exploited," Collins observed. "Even family members." The forensic technician carefully bagged the flash. "Drive." "We'll examine this immediately. If it contains video or audio recordings as suggested by your mother's notes, it will significantly strengthen the case." What about the safe deposit box key?" Peter asked, indicating the small key that had fallen from Mom's letter. "Do you know which bank?" Collins asked. I shook my head. "The letter doesn't specify." "First National was your parents' primary bank," Peter recalled. "It would be logical to start there." Collins nodded. "I'll send an officer with you. Given the circumstances, the bank should allow access with proper identification and the key, even without the specific box number." While the technician finished processing the evidence, Collins took my formal statement, recording details about Marcus's behavior in the months leading up to Mom's death, his insistence on administering her medications personally, his efforts to isolate her, the confusion he had attributed to her cancer, but which now seemed deliberately induced. "Your mother was extraordinarily brave," Collins said when we finished. "Gathering this evidence while seriously ill, all while maintaining a facade to prevent Marcus from suspecting her knowledge." "She was protecting me," I said, the realization hitting me fully. If Marcus had known she suspected him, he might have accelerated his plan, Collins finished grimly. Instead, she created a comprehensive case against him that extends beyond her death. An hour later, Peter and I arrived at First National Bank, accompanied by Officer Rodriguez. The manager, a contemporary of Dad's named James Harmon, recognized me immediately. "Emma Parker," he greeted warmly. "You look just like your father. I was so sorry to hear about Rachel." His expression darkened. "And now these troubling allegations about Mr. Winters." "We need to access a safe deposit box," Officer Rodriguez explained, showing his credentials. "We believe it contains documents relevant to an ongoing criminal investigation." Mr. Harmon examined the key I provided. "This is one of ours, certainly. Give me a moment to check our records." He returned shortly. The box was rented by Rachel Parker 5 months ago. Emma is listed as the only authorized user besides Rachel herself. He led us to the vault area, where Officer Rodriguez documented the process as the box was retrieved. Unlike the library locker, this container was substantial, designed for important documents and valuables. Inside, wrapped in acid-free paper, were the original copies of Dad's will and trust documents, exactly as Mom had described. Additionally, there were insurance policies, property deeds including one for the lakeside cabin showing it held in trust for me, and a separate sealed envelope labeled, "In case of suspicious death." Officer Rodriguez carefully documented each item. "These will need to be examined by the forensic team, but we can make copies for your records immediately." As we were preparing to leave, Mr. Harmon approached with another staff member. "Ms. Parker, Angela from our safe deposit department has something you should know." Angela, an older woman with a thoughtful expression, stepped forward. I assisted. "Your mother, when she rented this box," she explained. "She was quite weak that day, needed a wheelchair, but insisted on coming personally rather than sending Mr. Winters." "Did she say anything unusual?" I asked. "She made a specific request that we never confirm the existence of this box to anyone but you, even with proper identification. She seemed frightened." Angela hesitated. 2 weeks later, Mr. Winters came in asking about safe deposit boxes in Rachel's name. Bank policy prevented me from disclosing any information, but he was quite insistent. Claimed Rachel was confused and hiding important medical documents he needed. "Did you tell him anything?" Officer Rodriguez asked. "Absolutely not," Angela affirmed. But afterward, I called Rachel directly to alert her to his inquiry. She thanked me and said it confirmed her suspicions. She looked troubled. A week later, we received notice of her passing. I've wondered ever since if I should have done more. "You did exactly right," I assured her. "Mom was gathering evidence. Your call probably helped her protect these documents." Back in the car, Peter examined the copies we'd been given of Dad's original will and trust documents. "These are definitive," he said. "The house was placed in trust for you, with Rachel as trustee until you turned 18. Marcus should never have had access to sell or refinance the property." "How did he manage it then?" I asked. "Forgery, most likely," Peter replied grimly. "The signatures on these refinancing documents don't match Rachel's exemplars." He tapped a clause in the trust agreement. "And this specifically prohibits any spouse from accessing or controlling trust assets without unanimous approval from all trustees, which included me. I certainly never approved any changes." My phone rang, Jenkins calling with updates. "Emma, we've had significant developments," he said when I answered. "The DA has filed additional charges against Marcus based on the new evidence. The fraud charges are now accompanied by attempted murder, elder abuse, and potential first-degree murder, pending the medical examiner's findings." "Has Marcus responded?" I asked. "His attorney withdrew from the case this morning," Jenkins reported. "Apparently, Ms. Prescott was unaware of the medical allegations. Marcus has requested a public defender, which has delayed proceedings. Slightly. What about the house and my trust fund?" "Judge Harriman has granted immediate restoration of all assets," Jenkins said. "The forensic accountants have traced most of the missing funds. though some were lost in Marcus's failed investments. However, with the house's equity and insurance policies, we should recover close to 80% of the total value. And Marcus's mother? Peter asked, having heard Jenkins through the speakerphone. Adult Protective Services is investigating. Jenkins. Confirmed. The preliminary findings suggest systematic financial exploitation dating back several years. They're evaluating her care needs and financial situation. After hanging up, Peter drove toward the house. My house now, legally recognized as mine once again. A weight seemed to lift as we turned onto the familiar street. Will you move back in? Peter asked as we parked in the driveway. Or would you prefer to stay at the apartment a while longer? I studied the craftsman bungalow where I'd grown up, where Dad had taught me to ride a bike on the front sidewalk, where Mom had read me stories on the porch swing. Despite the painful recent memories, this place held the essence of my family, history. I want to come home, I decided, but not yet. Not until the investigation is complete and we know everything. Peter nodded, understanding. One step at a time. Inside, the house felt different, cleaner somehow, now that the truth was emerging. We met Detective Collins in Dad's study, where technicians were carefully examining Marcus's home office. Transformation. We found something interesting, Collins said, gesturing to a false bottom in one of the desk drawers. Hidden compartment containing these. She held up evidence bags containing jewelry I recognized immediately. Mom's sapphire. Necklace from Grandma, her wedding ring from Dad, the pearl earrings that matched the ones I was wearing. He said these were sold or donated, I said, anger flaring anew. Along with these, Collins added, indicating more bags containing documents. Sale receipts for your father's first editions, or at least some of them. Apparently, Marcus had already begun liquidating assets before your mother's death. Can they be recovered? Peter asked. We're contacting the buyers, Collins confirmed. Since the sales involved stolen property, they should be reversible, though it may take time. The good news is that legitimate rare book dealers keep careful records. While Peter discussed recovery details with Collins, I wandered through the house, reconnecting with the space. In the kitchen, I found Mom's recipe box still tucked beside the refrigerator, her handwritten cards organized by category just as they'd always been. In the living room, gaps on the walls showed where valuable artwork had been removed, but family photos Marcus had deemed worthless remained on the side tables. Upstairs, I hesitated outside Mom's bedroom, a space I'd avoided during my hasty packing after being evicted. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room had been partially packed up, with boxes labeled clothing donation stacked by the closet. The dresser drawers stood empty, their contents presumably already removed. But the bedside table remained untouched, still holding Mom's reading. Glasses, her favorite lavender hand cream, and a framed photo of Dad holding me as a baby. I sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the tangible reminders of her absence. The medical evidence suggested Marcus had hastened her death, but she had been terminally ill regardless. The cruelty lay in stealing her final months, in transforming what should have been a peaceful transition surrounded by loved ones into a solitary battle against not just cancer, but betrayal. Emma? Peter called softly from the doorway. Collins has an update from the forensic lab. I followed him downstairs, where Collins waited with a tablet. The flash drive contained video recordings, she explained. Your mother, apparently, set up a hidden camera in her medication cabinet. She pressed play on a video file. The timestamp showed a date 3 months before Mom died. In the footage, Marcus opened the bathroom cabinet, removed a prescription bottle clearly labeled with Mom's name, and replaced several pills with different ones from a separate container he carried in his pocket. We've identified the substituted medication, Collins said. It's a drug that, while not poison in the conventional sense, is known to accelerate tumor growth in patients with your mother's specific cancer type. He was essentially feeding the cancer while presenting himself as the devoted caretaker. The calculated malice stole my breath. How long had this been happening? Based on your mother's records and these videos, at least 4 months, Collins replied. The specialists we've consulted suggest it likely reduced her life expectancy by half or more. He stole months she should have had, Peter said, his voice raw with anger. Months she used to build a case against him, Collins noted. Your mother was remarkable, Emma. Even dying, she was thinking ahead, protecting you, ensuring justice. The weight of Mom's sacrifice settled over me. Her choice to use her remaining strength not for comfort or peace, but for gathering evidence, for ensuring Marcus wouldn't escape consequences, for protecting me even after she was gone. What happens next? I asked Collins. The DA is presenting evidence to the grand jury tomorrow, she explained. Given what we've uncovered, indictments for first-degree murder are virtually certain. Marcus will likely remain in custody until trial, with bail either denied or set prohibitively high. And the house? My inheritance? The court has already invalidated all documents with questionable signatures, Collins confirmed. The house remains in your name through the trust your father established. As for the financial assets, the recovery process continues, though some losses may be permanent. After Collins departed, Peter and I walked through the house once more, making lists of what needed attention, what could wait, what might never be fully restored. You don't have to decide everything today, Peter reminded me. Take time to process all this. I know, I said, running my hand along the banister. Dad had crafted, but it helps to focus on practicalities. In Dad's study, the bookshelves stood mostly empty, the first editions already sold or packed for sale. Yet the built-ins themselves remained, Dad's craftsmanship enduring despite Marcus's efforts to erase his presence. We can rebuild the collection, Peter said, noting my gaze. Not all the books, perhaps, but enough to honor Michael's legacy. And Mom's, I added. Her letter mentioned forgiveness, but I'm not sure I'll ever reach that point. Forgiveness isn't for Marcus, Peter said gently. It's for you, to free yourself from the anger that can consume you. But that's a journey for another day. As evening approached, we prepared to leave. Me to return temporarily to the apartment above the bookstore, Peter to handle closing the shop for the night. At the front door, I paused for one last look at the house that was mine again. If changed, irrevocably by what had transpired within its walls. We'll make it home again, Peter promised, understanding my unspoken thoughts. Different, but still yours. Outside, the fading light cast long shadows across the porch where Mom and I had spent countless summer evenings reading side by side. A memory surfaced, Mom explaining why she'd chosen this house with Dad, despite it needing extensive renovation. Good bones, she'd said. That's what your father called it. A solid foundation that will stand through anything if you care for it properly. Like our family, I thought now. Damaged but not destroyed. Changed but not erased. And most importantly, built on a foundation of love that even Marcus, with all his calculated cruelty, had failed to undermine. As we drove away, my phone chimed with a text from Jenkins. Grand jury convening tomorrow at 9 a.m. Court appearance for temporary guardianship of Eleanor Winters at 2 p.m. Will you attend? I typed my response without hesitation. Yes, for Mom, for Eleanor, for all of us. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more legal proceedings, more steps toward justice. But tonight, I carried something precious back to the temporary sanctuary of Peter's apartment. Not just the tangible items I'd retrieved from the house, but the intangible certainty that Mom had fought for me until her final days. That her love had transcended even death to protect me from the man who had betrayed us both. And in that knowledge, I found a measure of peace amidst the storm of emotions still raging within me. The grand jury room was smaller than I'd imagined. Intimate almost, with wood-paneled walls and formal portraits of past judges observing the proceedings with painted solemnity. Jenkins had prepared me for my testimony, emphasizing the importance of clarity and directness when presenting the evidence Mom had gathered. "Just tell the truth," he advised as we waited in the hallway outside. "The documentation speaks for itself." Detective Collins joined us, her normally composed expression tinged with unusual enthusiasm. "The forensic accountants completed their analysis of the flash drive files last night," she informed us. "Your mother created a comprehensive spreadsheet, tracking every unauthorized transaction, complete with timestamps and account numbers. It's remarkably thorough." "Rachel was meticulous," Peter commented. "Even before all this, she documented everything." "That meticulousness might send Marcus to prison for life," Collins replied. "The medical evidence alone is damning, but combined with the financial fraud patterns, it creates an irrefutable narrative of premeditation." When my turn came to testify, I entered the grand jury room feeling the weight of responsibility, not just to the legal system, but to Mom's memory. 23 jurors watched as I was sworn in, their expressions ranging from curious to compassionate. For nearly 2 hours, I answered questions about Mom's letter, the evidence she'd gathered, Marcus's behavior before and after her death. I explained the discovery of the lockbox at the cabin, the key hidden in Dad's book, the library locker containing crucial documents. Through it all, I maintained the composed dignity Mom would have wanted, though inside, emotions churned with each revelation revisited. "Ms. Parker," the district attorney asked toward the end, "did your mother ever express concern for her safety regarding Mr. Winters prior to the written evidence we've reviewed today?" I considered carefully. Not explicitly, but in hindsight, her behavior changed as her illness progressed. She became more secretive, more careful about what she said on the phone. She started encouraging me to stay at school rather than visit home. And these changes coincided with when Mr. Winters began administering her medication personally? Yes, I confirmed. Around that same time, she also opened the safe deposit box, created the documentation we found, and apparently began setting up the hidden cameras. After my testimony concluded, Jenkins met me outside. "You did very well," he assured me. "The grand jury seemed particularly moved by the records of your mother's systematic investigation while battling terminal illness." "What happens now?" I asked. "The DA will continue presenting evidence through the afternoon. Given the strength of the case, indictments should come quickly, possibly by tomorrow." Peter checked his watch. "We should head to Judge Harriman's chambers for the Eleanor Winters guardianship hearing." The afternoon hearing was less formal than I'd expected, held in Judge Harriman's private chambers rather than a courtroom. Present were a representative from Adult Protective Services, a court-appointed guardian ad litem for Eleanor, Jenkins, Peter, and me. "This is a temporary guardianship determination," Judge Harriman explained. "Given the circumstances, Mr. Winters' power of attorney for his mother has been suspended pending criminal proceedings." The APS representative, Ms. Donahue, presented findings from their investigation. Mrs. Winters shows signs of financial exploitation dating back approximately 3 years. Her care facility reports that Mr. Winters reduced her care package multiple times, despite her need for additional services. Her financial records show systematic withdrawal of assets, with large sums transferred to accounts controlled exclusively by her son. "Has Mrs. Winters been informed of the situation?" Judge Harriman asked. "To the degree her condition allows," Ms. Donahue replied. "She has moderate dementia, with good days and difficult ones. She understands that her son is in legal trouble and that her finances have been compromised. She has expressed concern about the Parker family, specifically about Emma and Rachel." This surprised me. "She remembers us?" "She speaks of Rachel?" "Often," Ms. Donahue confirmed. "They were apparently close friends for many years. She asks about you as well, though she sometimes confuses present and past. The guardian ad litem, Mr. Foley, addressed the judge. Your Honor, after evaluating Mrs. Winters' situation, I recommend appointment of a professional guardian to manage her financial affairs, with supervised family visitation rights for appropriate relatives. Judge Harriman nodded thoughtfully. Ms. Parker, I understand you've requested to be included in the visitation approval list. May I ask why? I hadn't expected to be addressed directly. Eleanor was important to my mother, I explained. They were colleagues and friends for years before Marcus came into the picture. Mom would have wanted someone to look after Eleanor, especially now. Judge Harriman studied me with kind eyes reminiscent of Dad's. Commendable, especially given the circumstances. He turned to Ms. Donahue. Would such visitation be beneficial to Mrs. Winters? Potentially very beneficial, she confirmed. Familiar faces from her past often help ground patients with dementia. Additionally, Ms. Parker might provide valuable historical context for some of the financial questions we're investigating. Then it's settled, Judge Harriman declared. Temporary guardianship is granted to Riverside County Fiduciary Services, with approved visitation for Emma Parker and other non-implicated family members as deemed appropriate by the guardian and care facility. As we left the chambers, Jenkins received a call from the DA's office. The grand jury returned indictments on all counts, he reported after hanging up. First-degree murder, attempted murder, multiple counts of fraud and forgery, elder abuse. Marcus is being formally charged tomorrow morning. Will his new attorney request bail? Peter asked. They'll try, Jenkins said. But, given the severity of charges and flight risk, it's unlikely to be granted. In the meantime, the court has approved expedited access to your financial accounts and property. The house is officially released from evidentiary restrictions. You can move back in as early as tomorrow if you wish. The possibility of returning home felt both liberating and overwhelming. I'll need time to process everything first, I said. And I'd like to visit Eleanor before making any decisions. The Riverside Care Center occupied a pleasant campus on the outskirts of town, its grounds dotted with flowering trees and comfortable seating areas where residents enjoyed the spring afternoon. Inside, the atmosphere was warmer than I'd expected. More assisted living than traditional nursing home, with personalized door decorations and artwork brightening the hallways. The director, Dr. Hernandez, met us in her office. Mrs. Winters is having one of her better days, she explained. We've informed her that she has visitors, though we haven't specified who. Sometimes new information can be overwhelming. What should we expect? Peter asked. Eleanor's dementia primarily affects her short-term memory, Dr. Hernandez explained. She may repeat questions or lose track of conversation. Long-term memories remain largely intact, though sometimes with chronological confusion. The emotional content of memories tends to persist even when details fade. Will she recognize me? I asked. It's been several years since we've seen each other. Quite possibly, Dr. Hernandez said. Facial recognition often remains strong, especially for people associated with positive emotions. She led us to a sunny private sitting room where Eleanor Winters waited. The elegant, authoritative librarian I remembered had aged visibly, her once perfect posture now slightly stooped, her silver hair wispy around a face lined with years. Yet her eyes remained alert, curious as they fixed on us entering the room. Peter Parker, she said, her voice stronger than her frame suggested. Rachel's brother. You own that lovely bookstore downtown. Peter smiled warmly. Hello, Eleanor. It's good to see you again. Her gaze shifted to me, confusion briefly clouding her expression before recognition dawned. Emma, Michael and Rachel's daughter. Her eyes welled suddenly. Rachel's funeral. I wasn't there. Marcus said I was too ill to attend, but I should have been there for Rachel. I moved to sit beside her, taking her fragile hand in mine. It's okay, Eleanor. Mom would understand. How is Rachel? Eleanor asked, the momentary clarity slipping. She hasn't visited lately. Peter and I exchanged glances, unsure how to navigate this delicate territory. Dr. Hernandez had explained that contradicting dementia patients directly could cause distress. "Mom asked me to come visit you," I said gently. "She wanted to make sure you were doing well." Eleanor patted my hand. "Such a thoughtful girl, just like her mother. Rachel saved me when I retired, you know. Made sure I had meals, drove me to appointments. Then Marcus stepped in, said I shouldn't burden Rachel." A shadow crossed her face. "Marcus has been making decisions lately, financial decisions I don't understand. We're looking into those decisions," Peter assured her, "making sure everything is properly managed." "The house," Eleanor said suddenly, her focus sharpening. "He wanted me to sign papers for the house, said it was for a better facility, but then nothing changed except he stopped visiting as often." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I told Rachel something wasn't right. She promised to help." "And she did," I confirmed, the pieces connecting. "Mom kept that promise, Eleanor." We spent an hour with Eleanor, listening as she moved between present concerns and past memories. Despite the cognitive confusion, certain themes emerged consistently. Her long friendship with Mom, her pride in the library they'd built together, and troubling questions about financial documents Marcus had pressured her to sign. "The investment," she said at one point, remarkably lucid. "Riverfront Towers. Marcus said it was guaranteed, 15% returns minimum. I put in everything, retirement, savings, home equity." Her expression crumpled. Then nothing, just excuses, delays. Rachel started asking questions. As we prepared to leave, promising to return soon, Eleanor gripped my hand with surprising strength. "The safety deposit box," she said urgently. "Did Rachel show you? Marcus doesn't know about it." "Yes," I assured her. "We found it. Everything is safe." She relaxed visibly. "Good. Rachel said it was insurance, in case anything happened." A tear slipped down her wrinkled cheek. "I should have protected her from him. I introduced them, you know. My son, her friend, I thought—" She trailed off, lost momentarily in regret. "It wasn't your fault," I said firmly. "Marcus deceived everyone, including you." Eleanor nodded, though whether in agreement or simply acknowledgement was unclear. As Dr. Hernandez guided us out, she offered professional observation. That was an unusually coherent interaction for Eleanor. Familiar faces from her past clearly provide significant emotional anchoring. "Will she remember our visit?" Peter asked. "The emotional content will persist, even if specific details fade," Dr. Hernandez explained. "She'll retain the feeling of being supported and connected, which is tremendously beneficial for cognitive health." On the drive back to town, I processed what we'd learned. Eleanor was victimized first, I observed. Marcus used her to access Mom, then exploited them both. "Classic predator behavior," Peter said grimly. "Using trust relationships to gain access to victims." Eleanor trusted Marcus as her son. Rachel trusted him as Eleanor's son, and later as her husband. The calculated nature of it is chilling. Jenkins called as we neared downtown, his tone unusually urgent. "Emma, are you still with Peter? Can you come to my office immediately? There's been a development." 20 minutes later, we sat in Jenkins's conference room as he explained the situation. "Marcus's attorney contacted the DA with a plea offer," he said. "Second-degree murder, instead of first, with concurrent sentences for the financial crimes." "Why would the DA even consider that?" Peter asked. "The evidence for premeditation is overwhelming." "Because Marcus is offering something in exchange," Jenkins replied. "Information about other victims, potentially 3 additional murders through similar methods, spanning the past decade." The revelation struck like physical blow. 3 others? Before Mom? Apparently so, Jenkins confirmed. According to his attorney, Marcus claims these were practice runs, refining his methods before targeting your mother, who represented his most sophisticated operation. The practice runs, I repeated numbly. He's talking about women's lives, ended deliberately, as practice. The DA is evaluating the offer, Jenkins continued. They're attempting to corroborate his claims before making any decisions. If Marcus is telling the truth, identifying these victims could bring closure to other families. But a lesser charge, Peter noted, anger evident in his voice. A chance at eventual parole. Potentially, Jenkins acknowledged. Though given the multiplicity of crimes and Marcus's age, even a second-degree murder sentence would likely mean life imprisonment. What do they need from me? I asked, sensing there was more. Jenkins hesitated. Marcus has specified that he'll only reveal the identities of the other victims to you, Emma, in a supervised interview. His attorney claims it's because you earned his respect by uncovering his scheme. That's manipulation, Peter objected immediately. Another power play. Almost certainly, Jenkins agreed. You're under no obligation to participate, Emma. The DA can reject the plea offer and proceed with the existing charges, which are more than sufficient for a lifetime sentence. I considered the implications. The thought of facing Marcus repulsed me, yet the possibility of bringing closure to other families who might not even know their loved ones were murdered weighed heavily. What does Detective Collins think? I asked. She believes the claims about additional victims are likely true, Jenkins replied. Marcus's pattern of behavior suggests escalation over time. The financial crimes are well documented across multiple victims. It's plausible the murder technique evolved similarly. I took a deep breath. I'll do it. Not for Marcus, but for the other families. They deserve the same closure we're finding. Peter began to object, but stopped himself, instead asking, what protections would be in place? Maximum security, Jenkins assured us. The interview would take place at the county detention center with officers present. Marcus would remain shackled and separated by a barrier. Detective Collins would monitor the entire conversation. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. That night, back at Peter's apartment, I barely slept, my mind cycling through all we'd discovered and the prospect of facing Marcus again, not as his unwitting victim, but as someone who had exposed his crimes. You don't have to go through with this, Peter said at breakfast, noting my exhaustion. No one would blame you for refusing. I would blame myself, I replied. If other families are out there wondering what really happened to their loved ones, they deserve answers. The county detention center was sterile and imposing, all concrete and steel under harsh fluorescent lighting. Detective Collins met us in the administrative area, her professional demeanor firmly in place. Marcus is being cooperative, she reported. Too cooperative, which suggests he's playing an angle we haven't identified yet. Remember what we discussed. Give away nothing personal, don't respond to provocations, focus only on getting the victim's information. A guard led us to an interview room divided by a transparent barrier. Marcus sat on the other side, dressed in an orange jumpsuit that somehow failed to diminish his customary poise. The handcuffs connecting him to the table seemed incongruous against his manicured appearance. Emma, he greeted me, his voice carrying the same smooth confidence I remembered from family dinners and school events. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I sat across from him, conscious of Detective Collins standing behind me, of Peter waiting anxiously in the observation room. I'm not here for you, I stated plainly. I'm here for the families of the women you killed. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Not the charming expression he'd perfected for social situations, but something colder, more authentic. Direct as always. You get that from your mother. Don't talk about her, I said sharply. Names and details of your other victims. That's why I'm here. So businesslike, he observed. But there's a preliminary matter to address. A question I've been pondering since our confrontation at the bookstore. He leaned forward, the chains rattling slightly. When did you know? When did you first suspect something wasn't right? That's not why we're here, Detective Collins interjected from behind me. Marcus's gaze remained fixed on me. Indulge my curiosity, Emma. Professional courtesy from one investigator to another. Your mother built her case over months. Did you start building yours? I considered refusing, but extracting information sometimes required tactical exchanges. The trust fund, I answered. You claimed it never existed, but Peter remembered Dad establishing it. That was the first inconsistency. Marcus nodded appreciatively. The trust fund. I should have fabricated statements rather than denying its existence entirely. A miscalculation. He sighed. Rachel was more thorough than I anticipated, hiding documentation in multiple locations, creating redundancies I didn't discover until too late. The names, I prompted, refusing to be drawn into his narrative. Patience, Emma. We're engaging in an exchange of information. He studied me with unsettling intensity. You're probably wondering why. Why Rachel? Why your family? Though I hadn't planned to pursue this line of questioning, the opportunity to understand his motivation was valuable. Tell me. Practical considerations, primarily, he explained with disturbing casualness. Rachel represented an ideal combination of factors, financially stable through property assets rather than liquid accounts, which are more easily traced. Socially isolated after being widowed young. Emotionally vulnerable. Responsible for a dependent, which creates natural financial pressures and explanations for withdrawals. The clinical assessment of my family's tragedy made my stomach turn. And the others? Were they chosen for the same practical considerations? Similar profiles, yes, though less ideal in various ways. He leaned back, seemingly enjoying the conversation. Josephine Martinez, 2016. Prescott, Arizona. Official cause of death. Complications from diabetes. Nancy Wheeler, 2014. Salt Lake City. Officially, heart failure. And the first, Catherine Dunn, 2012. Eugene, Oregon. Liver cancer, supposedly. Detective Collins made notes behind me. We'll need more details to corroborate. Of course, Marcus agreed smoothly. Addresses, dates, specific methods, all part of our arrangement. But first, he focused on me again. I'm curious about one more thing, Emma. The library locker. How did you know to look there? I saw no harm in answering. Mom's letter mentioned hiding evidence where you wouldn't think to look. The library was her sanctuary for 20 years. Clever, Marcus acknowledged. I searched the house thoroughly, found the safe deposit box key, but couldn't determine which bank. Never considered Rachel would use her workplace. He shook his head, almost admiringly. She was more resourceful than I gave her credit for. You both were. Enough reflection, Detective Collins interrupted. Specific details about the other victims. Now. For the next hour, Marcus provided methodical details about his previous crimes. Dates, addresses, methods, evidence he'd removed or altered. The precision with which he recalled these details was perhaps the most disturbing aspect. These weren't crimes of passion or opportunity, but carefully orchestrated operations refined over years. Each case taught me something valuable, he explained with academic detachment. Josephine, I learned medication tampering was more effective than attempting to manipulate existing conditions. Nancy showed me that widows with adult children required different financial approaches than those with dependents at home. Catherine was my first attempt. Too rushed, too many variables. I almost got caught. But you didn't, I observed, until Mom. Something flickered across his expression. Annoyance. Perhaps, or reluctant respect. Rachel was unexpected. The documentation, the hidden cameras, the multiple evidence caches. Most people, when terminally ill, focus entirely on treatment or making peace with death. Rachel chose investigation instead. She chose justice, I corrected. She chose to protect me from you. Marcus considered this. Perhaps. Though if protection was her primary concern, she might have simply taken you and fled. Instead, she built a case, knowing she likely wouldn't survive to see it concluded. He studied me with clinical interest. She was gambling that you would finish what she started. She knew I would, I said with quiet certainty. After the interview concluded and Marcus was led away, Detective Collins reviewed her notes with me in a private consultation room. We'll investigate each case he described, she assured me. If his information proves accurate, the DA will honor the plea agreement, though I suspect the combined sentences will still ensure he never leaves prison. Will the other families be notified? I asked. Once we've verified the claims and secured evidence, Collins confirmed. It's a delicate process. Informing someone that a loved one's natural death was actually murder. I thought about the moment I'd read Mom's letter, the sickening realization that Marcus had been poisoning her. They deserve to know the truth, no matter how painful. They'll also know that the person responsible has been caught, Collins added. That their loved ones won't be forgotten in the system as natural deaths when they were actually victims. She regarded me with genuine admiration. You did something extraordinary today, Emma. Not everyone could have faced him like that. Back outside in the spring sunshine, Peter waited by the car, concern evident in his expression. How are you feeling? Strangely calm, I realized, like the last puzzle piece has fallen into place. On the drive back to town, I made a decision that had been forming gradually over the past days. I want to go home, I said. Back to the house, tonight. Peter glanced over, surprised, but supportive. Are you sure? There's no rush. I'm sure, I affirmed. It's time to reclaim what's mine, what Mom fought to preserve for me. That evening, I stood on the porch of my childhood home, key in hand, no longer a visitor or an evicted tenant, but the rightful owner. Inside, the house felt different, lighter somehow, as if the weight of deception had lifted with the truth's emergence. I moved through each room methodically, reconnecting with the space, mentally cataloging what remained and what had been lost. In the kitchen, I found Mom's favorite teacup still in the cabinet. In the living room, the reading lamp Dad had rewired himself still stood in the corner. Upstairs, I hesitated outside Mom's bedroom before deliberately stepping inside. The space remained partially packed from Marcus's hasty donations, but now I recognized the selective nature of what he'd removed. Valuable items liquidated quickly, sentimental objects deemed worthless left behind. On the bedside table, her reading glasses remained beside a dog-eared paperback, the last novel she'd been reading. I picked it up, a bookmark still holding her place 3/4 through the story. She would never finish it now, would never know how the story ended. But she had finished her own story, not as a victim, but as the architect of justice that extended beyond her death. She had protected me, exposed Marcus, and potentially brought closure to other families who didn't yet know they needed it. In Dad's study, the empty bookshelves awaited new volumes to replace those lost. The desk where he'd once sketched renovation. Plans stood cleaned of Marcus's papers and personal items, now ready for new purposes. I sat in Dad's chair, remembering how he'd lift me onto his lap as a child, showing me blueprints and explaining how houses were built from the ground up. Foundation first, then framework, then all the details that transformed construction into home. My phone chimed with a text from Jenkins. Forensic accountants located offshore accounts. Additional funds recovered. Meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. to discuss asset restoration. Another text followed, this from Detective Collins. Prescott PD, confirming details on Josephine Martinez case. Your interview made the difference. Thank you. I set the phone aside, overwhelmed by the tangible progress toward resolution. The house was mine again. Justice for Mom was proceeding through the legal system. Even my financial future, the education she'd prioritized, was being secured through the recovery process. Moving to the window, I watched the sunset paint the neighborhood in golden light. The same view Mom and Dad had shared when they'd first bought this house, with good bones, as they'd described it. The same view Mom had found hope in during her final months, even as she'd methodically documented Marcus's crimes. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more legal proceedings, more steps toward rebuilding. The journey ahead remained long. Recovery of assets, decisions about college, emotional healing that would likely take years. But tonight, standing in the home my parents had created, I felt something unexpected amid the grief and anger. Sense of continuity, of purpose extending beyond the immediate trauma. Mom's meticulous evidence gathering, Dad's careful trust provisions, Peter's unwavering support, even Eleanor's fragmented memories, all threads weaving together to form a safety net I hadn't known existed until I needed it most. This house had withstood more than architectural challenges over the years. It had weathered death, deception, and betrayal. Yet it remained standing, its good bones intact despite everything. Like me. 1 year after Marcus's arrest, I stood at the window of Dad's study, my study now, watching autumn leaves drift across the lawn. The maple tree Dad had planted when I was born blazed orange against the clear October sky, its branches stronger and fuller than the sapling I remembered from childhood photos. Ready to go? Peter asked from the doorway. I nodded, gathering the folder of documents I'd prepared for today's meeting. As ready as anyone can be for a sentencing hearing. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. Marcus's case had drawn national attention after the additional victims were confirmed. The story of a calculating predator targeting vulnerable widows, culminating in my mother's methodical, posthumous exposure of his crimes, had captivated public interest. Several true crime podcasts had already requested interviews, which I'd consistently declined. Inside, Jenkins waited in the corridor, his expression solemn but satisfied. The plea agreement is finalized. Second-degree murder for Rachel, with consecutive sentences for the financial crimes and additional murder charges from the other jurisdictions. Effectively, life without parole. He'll never hurt anyone else, Peter observed. No, Jenkins agreed. The irony is that without Rachel's evidence, he might have continued his pattern indefinitely. Each case alone looked like natural causes. Only when viewed collectively did the pattern emerge. We entered the courtroom, taking seats in the front row. Families of the other victims occupied nearby benches, people I'd come to know over months of shared grief and healing. Josephine Martinez's son nodded in recognition. Nancy Wheeler's sister gave a small wave. Catherine Dunn's elderly parents sat rigid with dignity, their hands clasped tightly together. When Marcus entered in handcuffs and prison attire, he appeared diminished somehow, his once immaculate appearance now institutional, his confident bearing muted by confinement. Yet his eyes remained calculating as they swept across the courtroom, lingering briefly on me before moving on without reaction. Judge Harriman's entrance brought the room to attention. The proceedings moved with formal efficiency. Statements from the prosecution outlining the plea agreement, confirmation from Marcus's public defender, victim impact statements from family members. When my turn came, I approached the podium with the quiet strength I'd cultivated over the past year. Your Honor, Marcus Winters didn't just murder my mother. He attempted to erase her legacy, her protection of me, and her pursuit of justice. He calculated that her death would end any investigation into his crimes. I met Marcus's gaze directly for the first time since the jail interview. He was wrong. My mother's final act was to ensure that even in death, she would protect me and bring him to justice. While no sentence can restore what he took from all of us, knowing he will spend the remainder of his life in prison honors my mother's sacrifice and determination. Judge Harriman delivered the sentence with appropriate gravity. Multiple life terms without possibility of parole, to be served consecutively in a maximum security facility. As Marcus was led away, he glanced back once, his expression unreadable. I wondered if he was calculating even now, planning appeals or seeking some new advantage. But whatever schemes he might devise, he would implement them from behind bars, his freedom permanently forfeit. Outside afterward, Detective Collins approached with uncharacteristic informality. "How are you feeling?" "Relieved," I admitted. "Though it's strange. Closure isn't quite what I expected. It doesn't feel like an ending." "Because it isn't," she observed wisely. "Legal justice is just one component of recovery. The rest continues." "Speaking of continuing," Peter interjected, checking his watch, "we should head to the care facility. Eleanor's expecting us for lunch." Eleanor's condition had stabilized over the past year, her cognitive function strengthened through regular visits and appropriate medical care. Though her short-term memory remained impaired, our weekly lunches had become a cherished routine for us both. She rarely asked about Marcus anymore, as if her mind had mercifully disconnected from the son who had betrayed her so completely. Today, she waited in the facility's garden room, a colorful fall arrangement decorating the table she'd reserved for our lunch. "Emma! Peter!" she called, waving us over with enthusiasm. "I made them serve huckleberry pie today, Rachel's favorite." I embraced her gently, accustomed now to her association of mom in the present tense. "It looks delicious, Eleanor." "How did your meeting go?" she asked as we settled at the table. "The important one you mentioned last week." "It went well," I confirmed, impressed that she'd retained this detail. "Everything is resolved now." Eleanor nodded sagely. "Good. Resolution matters." She patted my hand. "Rachel would be proud of you, finishing your first year of college while handling all this." "She would indeed," Peter agreed, serving the quiche the facility's chef had prepared for our lunch. Emma made the dean's list while managing the house renovation and the legal proceedings. I deferred my original college acceptance to stay local, enrolling at Riverside Community College for prerequisite courses while the legal case progressed. The decision had proved unexpectedly rewarding, allowing me to restore the house, support Eleanor, and process my grief without the additional stress of relocation. Next fall, I would transfer to State University as originally planned, majoring in forensic accounting with a minor in criminal justice, a career path inspired by Mom's meticulous financial detective work. After lunch, as Peter chatted with Dr. Hernandez about Eleanor's progress, I helped her back to her apartment where she insisted on showing me her latest project, a scrapbook of library memories. "I found these photographs in my old desk," she explained, pointing to images of Mom and Eleanor at various library events throughout the years. Sharon brought them from storage. The photos showed a younger, vibrant Eleanor alongside Mom at book fairs, children's readings, and staff celebrations, tangible evidence of their friendship before Marcus's manipulation. In one particularly poignant image, they stood proudly before a newly installed rare books display, their shared passion for literature evident in their expressions. "You have her smile," Eleanor observed, touching a photo of Mom laughing at some forgotten joke. "And her determination." "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved. "That means a lot." Eleanor turned the page to reveal newspaper clippings about the library's centennial celebration. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice suddenly clearer, more focused, "about the money Marcus took. Not just from me, but from all of us." "Try not to worry about that," I soothed. "Your new guardian has stabilized your finances, and the facility has committed to maintaining your care regardless of payment fluctuations. Not for me, Eleanor corrected. For the library. Rachel and I always talked about establishing a restoration fund for the rare books collection. I still want to do that. Her unexpected clarity on this topic surprised me. That's a wonderful idea, Eleanor. I've spoken with Mr. Jenkins, she continued. He's helping establish a trust from what remains of my assets. The Rachel Parker Memorial Rare Books Preservation. Und, she looked at me expectantly. Would that be all right with you? Emotion tightened my throat. It would be perfect. Mom would be honored. Eleanor smiled, satisfied. Good. It's important to build things that last. Rachel understood that. So did your father, with his beautiful houses. Her expression turned wistful. We can't always protect people we love, but we can create legacies that outlive our mistakes. The insight from this woman who drifted so often between confusion and clarity struck me deeply. Despite everything Marcus had done to both of us, Eleanor was focused not on destruction, but creation, establishing something meaningful from the wreckage of betrayal. Later, driving back to the house with Peter, I shared Eleanor's library fund. Plans. It's remarkable how she's processed everything, I observed. Finding purpose instead of just dwelling on loss. She's resilient, Peter agreed. Like someone else I know. He glanced at me with evident pride. You've handled this year with extraordinary grace, Emma. Not always gracefully, I admitted. Thinking of the nights I'd spent rage cleaning the house, scrubbing away any traces of Marcus's presence, or the days I'd lost to grief when finding another of Mom's possessions hidden away. Grace isn't about perfection, Peter corrected. It's about moving forward despite the difficulty. You've done that consistently. At home, I changed from my court clothes into comfortable work attire. The house renovation was nearing completion. Therapeutic project I'd undertaken with settlement funds from the estate recovery. Rather than erasing the past, I'd focused on honoring it, restoring Dad's original woodwork that Marcus had begun replacing, recreating Mom's reading nook in the living room corner, gradually rebuilding Dad's book collection through careful hunting at estate sales and used bookstores. Today's project was painting the study, replacing the stark white Marcus had preferred with the warm amber Dad had originally chosen. As I arranged drop cloths and prepared brushes, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Emma Parker? Aye, woman's voice asked when I answered. This is Meredith Dunn, Catherine's mother. We met at the courthouse. Of course, Mrs. Dunn, I acknowledged, remembering the dignified elderly couple. Is everything all right? Yes, dear. Better than all right. Her voice warmed. My husband and I have been sorting through Catherine's belongings. Finally. Ready after all these years. We found something you might want. Something of Catherine's? I asked, confused about the connection. Not exactly, Mrs. Dunn explained. Catherine was an antique book dealer. After her death, we stored her inventory in our basement, never knowing what to do with it. While cataloging it this week, we found something remarkable. A first edition. Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea. My breath caught. Like my father's collection. Exactly. When we checked the provenance documentation, we discovered it was originally sold by your father's estate to a dealer in Portland, who later sold it to Catherine. Given everything that's happened, it seemed right that it should return to your family. The synchronicity was overwhelming. One of Dad's beloved books, sold by Marcus years ago, finding its way back through the family of another victim. That's incredibly generous, I managed. It's being delivered to your home tomorrow, Mrs. Dunn continued. Catherine would have wanted it returned to its rightful place. Books belong where they're treasured. After the call ended, I sat on the drop cloth, processing this unexpected connection between our families. How Marcus's destructive path had inadvertently created links between those he'd harmed. The thought of Dad's book returning home felt symbolic somehow, a small restoration amid irrevocable loss. The painting progressed steadily through the afternoon, each brushstroke reclaiming the space. By evening, the study walls glowed with the warm color I remembered from childhood, the backdrop for Dad's architectural drawings and Mom's reading sessions. The empty bookshelves awaited new volumes, including the returning Hemingway that would arrive tomorrow. Zoe dropped by as I was cleaning brushes, bringing dinner and her characteristic energy. Our friendship had deepened through the crisis. Her unwavering support a constant when everything else shifted. She'd even changed her college plans to stay local, claiming coincidence, though I suspected deliberate choice. "The study looks amazing," she approved, setting out takeout containers on the kitchen island. Very Michael Parker vibes. That was the goal, I acknowledged, washing paint from my hands. Keeping what matters, changing what doesn't. "Speaking of changes," Zoe segued, "have you decided about the summer program? Application deadline is Friday." The forensic accounting internship with the FBI had been Detective Collins's suggestion, an opportunity to apply my developing skills while contributing to financial crime investigations. The program would take me to Washington, D.C. for 10 weeks, my first significant time away from Riverside since everything had happened. "I'm still considering it," I hedged. "There's so much to finish here." Zoe fixed me with her no-nonsense stare. "The renovation is nearly complete. Peter can check on the house. Eleanor is stable. What's really holding you back?" I considered the question seriously, recognizing my own resistance. Maybe I'm not ready to move forward completely. Being here, working on the house, it keeps me connected to Mom and Dad. "You don't need physical proximity for that connection," Zoe pointed out gently. "They're with you regardless. This internship aligns perfectly with the career path your Mom inspired. Wouldn't she want you to pursue it?" The question resonated uncomfortably with truth. Mom had always prioritized my education and independence, values she'd fought to preserve even in her final months. "I'll submit the application," I decided. "But if I'm accepted, you're helping me pack." "Deal," Zoe agreed, visibly pleased with this resolution. Later that evening, after Zoe departed, I found myself drawn to the lakeside cabin. Though I'd visited periodically throughout the year for maintenance and reflection, tonight felt different, the sentencing providing a symbolic endpoint to the legal journey that had begun with the lockbox discovery under the cabin floor. The drive was peaceful, autumn colors muted in the twilight. The cabin stood solid against the gathering darkness, its simple A-frame silhouette unchanged since Dad had purchased the property 20 years earlier. Inside, recent improvements reflected my own touch: new furnishings, updated appliances, repaired dock extending into the lake. I built a small fire in the stone fireplace, then settled in the window seat overlooking the water. The moonlight created a silver path across the lake's surface, reminiscent of countless family evenings spent in this exact spot. Dad telling stories, Mom reading aloud, the three of us connected in simple togetherness. From my bag, I retrieved Mom's final letter, the one found in Jenkins's office that had initiated our investigation. Though I'd memorized its contents months ago, the physical document retained significance, tangible evidence of her foresight and determination. "I'm applying for the FBI internship," I told the empty room, feeling Mom's presence despite her absence. "The forensic accounting program, 10 weeks in Washington." The cabin creaked gently in response, its familiar sounds comforting rather than eerie. Outside, wind rustled through pine branches, creating nature's gentle applause. "The house renovation is almost finished," I continued the one-sided conversation. "Dad's study is back to the original color. One of his first editions is coming, home tomorrow. Found its way back through Catherine Dunn's family of all connections." Discussing these developments aloud helped crystallize their significance. The gradual restoration of what Marcus had attempted to destroy, the unexpected connections formed through shared trauma and healing. Eleanor is creating a library fund. In your name, I added, knowing Mom would appreciate this particular development. For rare book preservation. She's remarkably clear about it, despite everything else she struggles to remember. The fire popped and settled, sending sparks up the chimney. In the quiet that followed, I confronted the question I'd been avoiding. Throughout the legal proceedings, throughout the house restoration, throughout the careful rebuilding of my life, how do I move forward without forgetting? I asked the silence. How do I honor what happened without being defined by it? No dramatic answer manifested, no ghostly apparition or mysterious sign. Just the continued peaceful sounds of the cabin at night, the lake lapping gently at the shore, the fire warming the central room. Yet, in that ordinary moment, understanding emerged, not as revelation, but recognition. Moving forward didn't require forgetting or diminishing what had happened. The experiences, both tragic and triumphant, were now intrinsically part of my identity, not as defining limitations, but as foundation stones for whatever I would build next. I carefully refolded Mom's letter, returning it to its envelope. While I would always preserve this tangible connection, perhaps I didn't need to carry it with me constantly anymore. The strength she'd demonstrated, the justice she'd orchestrated, the protection she'd ensured. These lived on through my actions, not just through preserved documents. That night, I slept at the cabin for the first time since discovering the lockbox beneath its floorboards. My dreams were not of Marcus or court proceedings or grim evidence, but of simpler times. Dad teaching me to fish from the dock, Mom identifying constellations from the deck, family picnics on summer afternoons. Morning arrived with characteristic mountain clarity, sunlight sparkling on dew-covered grass, mist rising from the lake surface. I walked to the end of the newly repaired dock, coffee mug warming my hands against the autumn chill. In the distance, a loon called to its mate, receiving an immediate answer across the water. My phone signaled an incoming text, Jenkins with final confirmation of the sentencing paperwork. The legal chapter was officially complete. Marcus would serve his first 15 years in maximum security before potential transfer to medium security for his remaining sentences, effectively ensuring he would die in prison. A second text arrived from Detective Collins. Josephine Martinez's family asked for your contact information. Okay to share. They're creating a support network for families of Marcus's victims. I texted back immediate approval. The unexpected community that had formed among the victims' families had become a source of collective healing, each of us. Understanding aspects of the other's experiences that even well-meaning friends and therapists couldn't fully comprehend. On the drive back to Riverside, I made a decision that had been forming gradually over recent months. At the first intersection, instead of turning toward home, I navigated toward the cemetery where Mom and Dad were buried side by side beneath a simple shared headstone. The morning sunlight cast long shadows across the peaceful grounds as I made my way to their graves. I hadn't visited as often as perhaps I should have, finding stronger connections to their memory in the house, the cabin, the everyday objects they'd touched and cherished. Someone had placed fresh flowers recently, likely Peter, who maintained his own regular visitation schedule. I added my own small bouquet of lake wildflowers gathered that morning, arranging them beside the more formal arrangement. I'm applying for the FBI internship, I told them, continuing last night's one-sided conversation. And I've decided to sell the cabin. The decision had crystallized during my morning coffee on the dock. Recognition that while the cabin held precious memories, it also represented a chapter concluding. The property could provide substantial funding for my education and future, while the memories would remain regardless of ownership. Not the house, I clarified, as if they might worry about this distinction. That stays in the family, just as you both wanted. But the cabin feels like it's served its purpose for us. A gentle breeze stirred the wildflowers, scattering a few petals across the granite marker. I traced the engraved names with my fingertips. Michael Parker, beloved husband and father. Rachel Parker, beloved wife and mother. Simple inscriptions that couldn't possibly capture their impact or legacy. "I'm keeping your watch, Dad," I continued, "and Mom's recipe box. The important things aren't the properties, but the connections they fostered." I smiled faintly. "Besides, Eleanor's library fund needs an initial contribution. The cabin sale can establish that while still covering my education." As I prepared to leave, a groundskeeper approached respectfully. "Miss Parker? Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you might want to know. Your mother's grave receives more visitors than almost any other in this section." "Visitors?" I questioned. "Besides my uncle and me?" He nodded. "Library staff come regularly. Some former patrons. Even students from the college where she occasionally guest lectured. They leave notes sometimes." He gestured to a small collection of stones, pine cones, and paper scraps arranged at the base of the headstone. "I gather them weekly to protect from weather, but I've saved them for you." He handed me a weatherproof container from his cart. Inside were dozens of small notes, thanking Mom for book recommendations that changed lives, for research assistance that enabled academic success, for quiet kindness during difficult times. "I had no idea," I said, deeply moved by this evidence of Mom's broader impact. "Some people touch more lives than we realize," the groundskeeper observed. "Their influence continues long after they're gone." This unexpected glimpse into Mom's extended legacy accompanied me home, the container of notes a treasure to explore later. The house welcomed me back, no longer the site of betrayal and loss, but increasingly a space of restoration and possibility. The Hemingway First Edition arrived that afternoon, delivered personally by a courier from the Dunn family. Holding the volume Dad had once treasured, I examined the familiar binding, the precise typography, the delicate pages that had somehow survived multiple owners to return home. I placed it on the study shelf, the first book in the reconstructed collection, a symbolic cornerstone for the library I would gradually rebuild. Not an exact replication of what Marcus had destroyed, but a thoughtful curation reflecting both heritage and my own developing interests. That evening, I completed the FBI internship application, articulating in the personal statement how Mom's methodical financial investigation had inspired my career direction. Rather than minimizing the personal connection to fraud and financial crimes, I emphasized how it informed my perspective and motivation. My mother's posthumous financial detective work revealed not only crimes against our family, but a pattern affecting multiple victims across years, I wrote. Her meticulous documentation created connections between cases that appeared unrelated, demonstrating how financial evidence can reveal truths that might otherwise remain hidden. The completed application represented more than potential career advancement. It acknowledged how tragedy had shaped but not defined my path forward. Mom's final act of protection had evolved into inspiration, transforming victimhood into purpose. 2 days later, Zoe accompanied me to the real estate office where I listed the cabin for sale. The agent, carefully selected from a different firm than Marcus had worked for, was respectfully enthusiastic about the property's potential. "Lakefront is always desirable," she explained, reviewing comparable sales, "especially with the recent renovations you've completed. The market is particularly strong for vacation properties right now." "I have 2 conditions," I stipulated. "First, I want to be transparent about the property's connection to the Marcus Winters case. I don't want buyers learning about it after purchase and feeling deceived." The agent nodded understanding. "We can prepare an appropriate disclosure statement that acknowledges the history without sensationalizing it. Second," I continued, "I'd like right of first refusal if the new owners ever decide to sell. It's unlikely I'll be in position to repurchase anytime soon, but I'd appreciate the option." "Easily arranged," she confirmed, making notes. Is there a particular timeline you're hoping for? No rush, I decided. Finding the right buyers matters more than immediate sale. Zoe squeezed my hand supportively as we left the office. You okay with this? Better than okay, I realized. It feels right, letting go of what served its purpose while preserving what's still valuable. The following week brought forward movement on multiple fronts. The FBI internship program requested an interview, scheduled for the following month. Jenkins confirmed that the final financial reconciliation from Marcus's fraud was complete, with recovered assets distributed proportionally among victims. And most significantly, Harold and Diane Dunn, Catherine's parents, invited me to join. The first official gathering of families connected through Marcus's crimes. We're meeting at our home in Eugene next month, Harold explained during our phone call. Not to dwell on tragedy, but to celebrate the connections formed through resilience. Several families have already confirmed attendance. The invitation represented another step in the ongoing transformation of trauma into meaningful connection. I'd be honored to attend, I accepted. Spring semester registration opened that same week, requiring decisions about my academic path regardless of the internship outcome. With Peter's encouragement, I arranged a full course load transferable to State University, focusing on advanced accounting and criminology prerequisites. Keeping options open is wise, he advised. The internship would be valuable experience, but your education progresses either way. As autumn deepened toward winter, the house transformation neared completion. The final major project, restoring the original porch swing where so many family memories had formed, concluded just as the first snow-dusted Riverside's historic district. I sat on the newly hung swing, wrapped in a quilt from Mom's hope chest, watching snowflakes drift lazily past the porch lights. The street looked like a scene from a holiday card, historic homes outlined with twinkling lights, wreaths adorning century-old doors, families visible through windows engaged in ordinary evening activities. My phone chimed with an email notification. The FBI internship program confirming my interview date in December. Another step forward, another opportunity to transform Mom's legacy of meticulous investigation into meaningful work of my own. From the street, a familiar figure approached. Detective Collins, now a regular visitor as our professional connection had evolved into genuine friendship. Testing out the new swing? She called, climbing the porch steps. It looks exactly right for this house. Dad built the original, I explained, making room beside me. This is as close to his design as we could manage from old photos. Collins settled beside me, producing a folder from her coat. I have something for you. The DA's office released the last of your mother's personal effects from evidence today. Inside the folder was Mom's journal, the record of her investigation, that had been held as key evidence throughout the legal proceedings. Its pages contained not just financial documentation, but her personal thoughts during those final months. Hopes, fears, reflections on mortality and justice. I thought you might want this before the anniversary next week, Collins said gently. The anniversary of Mom's death, a date I'd been simultaneously dreading and preparing for. Thank you, I said, carefully accepting this final piece of her legacy. Your mother was extraordinary, Collins observed. Few people facing terminal illness would have devoted their remaining energy to building such a comprehensive case. Her work directly led to justice not just for herself, but for 3 other victims whose cases would have remained closed as natural deaths. She was protecting me, I said, tracing the journal's worn cover. That was always her primary motivation. Protection that extended far beyond what anyone might reasonably expect, Collins noted. I've worked financial crimes for 15 years, Emma. What Rachel accomplished, creating connections between seemingly unrelated cases, documenting evidence that would stand up in court, anticipating legal challenges to her findings. That's professional-level investigation. The assessment resonated with my own emerging understanding of Mom's final actions. Not just maternal protection, but methodical justice-seeking that had ultimately exposed a serial predator who might otherwise have continued indefinitely. She would be incredibly proud of how you've handled everything, Collins added. Not just surviving, but actively rebuilding and finding purpose through the experience. As Collins departed with promises to check in before my FBI interview, I remained on the porch swing, Mom's journal in my lap, watching snow accumulate on the front lawn. The weight of the past year settled around me, not as burden but as foundation, supporting whatever would come next. Inside the house, lights glowed warmly against the winter evening. The study with its restored amber walls and gradually filling bookshelves. The kitchen where I'd recently begun attempting Mom's recipes. The living room where Peter and I held weekly dinner gatherings that had expanded to include Zoe, Detective Collins, and occasionally Jenkins and his wife. The house had transformed alongside me, neither of us unchanged by what had occurred, yet neither defined solely by tragedy. Like the first edition Hemingway that had found its way home through unexpected connections, we had emerged from disruption with our essential character intact, our stories continuing. Tomorrow would bring more steps forward, final preparations for the FBI interview, meetings with Eleanor's care team, ongoing correspondence with the network of families connected through shared experience. Each activity represented threads, weaving a new pattern from materials Marcus had attempted to destroy. For tonight, the porch swing moved gently in the winter stillness. Snow fell softly on ground that would eventually yield spring growth, and the journal waited to reveal Mom's final thoughts when I was ready to receive them. Not yet, perhaps, but soon. Another step in the ongoing journey of reclaiming what mattered most. The house stood solid around me, its good bones strengthened rather than weakened by the storms it had weathered. Inside and out, it reflected the truth Mom had fought to preserve, that some foundations cannot be broken, some legacies cannot be stolen, and some stories continue beyond their expected endings. My story, our family's story, was one of those. Not concluded but evolving, not defined by loss but by what remained and what would yet be built on the sturdy foundation of truth, justice, and love that had ultimately prevailed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.